Okay, it is 6 o'clock on Monday, July 14th, 2025. And we are opening a special joint planning and city council joint session meeting. Could we have the roll call, please?
All right, we'll start with council. Counselor Terrell? Here. Counselor Thompson Riser? Here. Counselor Erickson?
Here.
Counselor Ward Mullen? Counselor Skipper?
Here.
Mayor Watkins?
Here.
Counselor Hill is absent, but we have quorum. Planning commissioners, we have Commissioner Fernandez Madrid.
Here.
Commissioner Chavez.
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Rhodes. Here. And it looks like at this time, Commissioner Nordstrom, Rake, and Stewart are absent.
Thank you. Okay, please join with me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All righty. We will start the meeting off with our citizen comment section. This section of the agenda allows members of the public to address the city council on any items off or on the agenda. When invited by the mayor, members of the public shall come forward, state your name and street address, and direct all comments to the mayor. Comments are typically limited to 3 minutes unless additional time is allowed by the mayor. We will start with items that are not on the agenda. Does anybody have any comments they would like to make? Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Yes. Wait, no, this is not question time. What, if you have a question, come up to the podium, please. Thanks. Okay. The call for the, okay. What I said was that when you're invited by the mayor, members of the public shall come forward, state your name and street address, and direct all comments to the mayor. Comments are typically limited to 3 minutes unless additional time is allowed by the mayor. We began with items that were not on our agenda. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Realize that
Mhm.
Mr. Major, do you mind using the microphone? I think some people in the back are having a hard time.
So I wrote down a few things. And the advantage. Right away. Maximize the way. Maybe. The data for you. Anyway. Always done this. Video and release. Waving. Impervious surface. Orange plane. Front row. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Are there any other? Yes, ma'am.
Can you hold the mic up closer?
Thank you. Wait. Oh, yeah. We can get it over there. Thank you. Yes. Anybody else? Are there any comments regarding items not on the agenda tonight? Whoops. Sure. Oh, yeah, I had backwards. Go ahead. Ready. Are we done? Thank you, folks, for making the effort to come out tonight and visit with us. We really do need to hear from the community, and we appreciate when you come in, even when it's not, and right now this is top of mind, I understand that, but even when it's not top of mind, if you've got something or if you know somebody that has something, we encourage you to come in and visit with us because this is how we find out what the city is talking about. So I appreciate your work tonight. Okay. We are moving on to discussion items. The first one is actually kind of a large item. We'll start with Grant and Main Street Cemetery and paving improvements recommendation to award. I'm going to turn it over to.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, and Planning Commissioners. I have to beg the forgiveness of the Planning Commissioners for these first three agenda items. We really tried to only do the TSP update this evening, but we have three very time-sensitive items for council discussion and action. So if you could just bear with us, although important, we believe they'll be brief, and then we can get to the meat of this evening's meeting, the TSP update, and have the focus be there.
Just to clarify, this is conversation only for the council.
Yes. So the first one, as you stated, Mayor, is for the West Grant and Main Street sanitary and paving improvements. This is related to the $2.2 million grant that we received from the federal government that is being administered through the Environmental Protection Agency. And now I'm going to hand it over to Gordon Monroe, our city engineer, to talk about the specifics.
All right, I can hear me, so you probably can. Okay, there was a virtual bid opening on July 2nd. And this project was broken up into actually 5 schedules. The intent of that was the bidding environment is a little bit unknown at this time because of the economics going on in the country. So this gave the city the ability to adjust the size of the project if required. And the last schedule that was added, which is which was added during the bid as an addendum, was overlay on Grant Street, a grind and inlay on half of West Main, and some sidewalks on West Main and Cunningham. There were 8 bids, which is a lot, so that's good competition. 2 bids did not turn in their first tier forms, so they cannot be considered. That's per law. I will say that the first tier forms can be turned in 2 hours after the bid. So a lot of contractors that they don't win the bid, they just don't turn in the form. So you still got 8 competitive bids. We check the math, no errors. We check the contractor's board. And the apparent low bid was Lawson. They are the low bid at $2,302,615. They appear to have both the experience and expertise to do this work. It's the type of work that they do. The project is well within their financial capability. And they had what we call a responsive and responsible bid. So responsible bid means that they bid the project straight up and they didn't put in little caveats. So sometimes you'll see a contractor that'll say, I'll do this work only if, and then they'll have some conditions. That's not considered a responsive bid. So all 8 were responsive. They are also responsible, meaning they have the qualifications, the equipment, and the financial standing, and they're in good standing on the contractor's board. The engineer's estimate was $2.5 million. And as Shannon indicated, the city received a grant for 2.2. And also, Shannon, you can correct me, but for the paving portion, the city had 400,000. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So we have $2.6 million in funding for the project. So we have sufficient funds to cover the low bid. It is our recommendation that all 5 schedules be awarded to Lawson for the $2,302,615. And if the city chooses to do that, we will send out a letter of award after the 1-week bid protest period is up. Are there any questions?
For the sake of trying to follow Robert's Rules of Order, I'm going to make a motion that the mayor and council approve and award the bid to Lawson Corporation for the bid amount of $2,302,615 and authorize the mayor to execute all necessary documents.
Second. Been moved and seconded?
We're not having a question and answer session?
Yes, after we move it second. That's how it works with Roberts. Yeah, we'll be discussing it here. Were there any other? Okay. Now, is there any discussion? Yes.
Well, Gordon, with this bid given to this contractor and you say they've pretty much checked off all the boxes, do you see that there's going to be issues with change orders? I can see maybe one or two or something, but do you see there's going to be a continuous change order problem with this job?
So on any project such as this, which has a lot of underground, there's going to be unknowns that you run into. The city should expect 5% change orders. That would just be common across the board for projects. And I know that some of the underground conditions that potentially we run into, we know a lot of the sewer line is clay and it's 80, 100 years old. We've run into this on other streets where the city has gone down to fix a service line. They get down to the main and they can see up and down the main. It's just a cave. And that's not a good thing. That's the start of a sinkhole. So there's things like that that we could run into that certainly would be a change. So 5% is what normally you would expect.
Thank you.
Yeah, is it safe to assume that this schedule is essentially like the timeline of when, how things will progress? Like is schedule 1, meaning they'll start on that section first, schedule 2, or if we award all schedule 5s, could potentially all of these, or 4 schedules, sorry, all the work be happening at the same time?
The schedules aren't, the work schedules are not set up as the schedule of work. Certainly, Schedule 4, which is the paving, would be the last thing that is done. And depending on the weather, it might actually have to wait till springtime. So there might be a pause between finishing the pipe and then finishing the paving. But which ones they tackle first or whether they have multiple crews, that's really up to the contractor. It's called means and methods.
Gordon, in here, in your memo, you said the project will replace critical sanitary sewer lines that are Grant and Main Streets in adjacent areas. Can you elaborate a little further on adjacent areas?
Oh, so one of the schedules is actually Pine Street. That's Schedule 2B. And that is about 3/4 of a block north of Main Street. It's the end of the line. So and it's only, well, it's 8-inch clay pipe. So it's also pipe that probably has lots of problems on it. And it does come over and the manhole is in the middle of the highway. So that's a project that we want to get done as part of this. So we get out of the highway with the problem sewers.
Were these bids, when they made these, when they did these bids, did they do them with the understanding that they're gonna run into clay pipes? So are they anticipating doing that?
Oh, yeah.
So they've maybe already figured that into the bid?
Well, they know it's clay pipe down there. They don't know the conditions of what's going on down there. It may all be fine. There may be big holes. Who knows? We don't know until we dig it up.
Are there any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, just, just a quick follow-up. So I know we're awarding this to take advantage of the 2025 construction season. But I don't necessarily see a stop date, like, is that on purpose, or are we expecting them to get the majority of this work done? Like you said, paving, obviously you have to be in a weather window for paving. I understand that.
Right. So
I guess I'm just saying, like, if construction continues to next year, who knows with the economy, this is a contract, so there,
it's a contract and there is a time specified in the contract for finishing the work. That doesn't start until the contracts are signed and a notice to proceed is signed. And so then we set the date of substantial completion, and then 30 days after that, final completion. I believe we gave them 8 months. I'd have to go back and look at the specs. So they should be done with the pipeline probably early in 2026. And that's the middle of the winter. That's why we don't want to pave. And we may give them an extension so that they can pave when the weather's better. But we want to get this done before the following summer of 2026, because ODOT's going to be coming in and paving the southern half of West Main Street. So we want to be done and out of there before they can get in.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the council? One more.
Super quick. Can we pick and choose the schedules that are less expensive? So for example, Turney Excavating, they were for Schedule 2B, they were quite a bit less. Or do we have to just choose one and?
So the way that the bid is set up is that it's the low bid of whichever schedules the city decides to do. So you don't pick and choose. You say, hey, we're going to do the base bid, which if you're going to award anything, you got to do the base bid, which is Grant Street. And that's Schedule 3. And then if you decided, okay, we're going to do Schedule 1 and 3, you would add those two schedules together and whoever is the low. So you only get one contractor. We only want one contractor, and that's how it's set up. If you get more, then you got multiple contractors out there running into each other and it becomes a mess.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Counselor Erickson, you got anything else?
Nope, I'm good.
Good. All right, do I have a motion to approve? Pardon? We do, that's right. Thank you very much. So we need to take a vote. And could you call a roll, please?
All right, roll call vote. Counselor Terrell, how do you vote?
I think we're voting to award Lawson.
I believe that's the motion on.
Yes.
Okay, yes.
Counselor Thompson Riser,
Yes.
Counselor Erickson,
Yes.
Counselor Ward Mullen, Counselor Skipper,
yes.
Mayor Watkins.
I don't have to vote on this one.
Okay. You're abstaining.
No, I'm not voting.
Point of order, I think you have to abstain then.
I will abstain then.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Moving right along then, on item B, the wastewater treatment plant change order.
Thank you, Mayor, Mayor and Council. This is a change order. And I'm going to hand this over to Gordon to talk about the technicalities, but this is one where it needed to come before council because otherwise, in order to get this done, if we didn't have approval, work would have to stop on the project. And that's not something we want to do, is to stop work on the project. So I'm going to hand this over to Gordon to explain what this change order is and why it's time sensitive to be done so that work can continue to proceed.
All right, thank you. So this is a additive change order, meaning we're not fixing anything that was in the design or adjusting for things that we found in the field. This is adding scope to the project. So the city has a chlorine contact chamber for disinfection of the effluent. And as part of the project, we expanded that tank, added 325 feet. It's a 54-inch diameter pipe. And it came to our attention from city staff that due to the particular way that the treatment plant is operated in the summertime, a flushing system is needed in that chlorine contact tank. And I will say I worked on maybe a dozen treatment plants and we don't have one of those flushing systems. But the system here is different enough that it becomes critical. So what happens in the summertime is that the discharge is not constant. So the flow through the tank actually stops because our discharge is to a spray irrigation system to farmer fields, and they only require water at particular times based on the weather and based on the crops, based on farming practices. So we could go 2-3 weeks, sometimes a month, without ever discharging. So what happens is the water that is in that tank, in that pipe, settles. So all of the solids in there settle to the bottom. It's just acting as a settling tank. And when the flow comes back through, it riles it all up. And the problem is that it creates a problem with control of the chemicals for disinfection. Solids suck up chemicals. And so you get this big burst of solids and you can't really control your disinfection. And it means that the city has a very challenging time meeting the discharge limits for disinfection. Whereas if we have this flushing line, it keeps the solids up in the liquid so that when it comes time to discharge, it's all homogeneous. And it's much, much easier to control the disinfection. So that's what the need is. And this adds approximately 565 feet of pipe. A lot of that pipe is actually built inside the contact chamber, which is a large pipe. So that's a confined space entry. And they cannot bury the contact tank until they put this other pipe in. So that's the time sensitive nature, is that will stop construction until a decision is made and the pipe is delivered. They'll have to order the pipe and get it delivered and then put it together. So that is the change order and the amount. I know I have it on here. $54,487.21. And if you look at the entire project, the change orders to date, including that, would be about 1% of the project. And I will say that the project is moving along very well at this this point. They're getting a lot of work done early, and it's been good work. So it's been a very smooth project to date. And that's it for, unless there's questions.
I move that the, excuse me, I move that the mayor and council approve change order number 4 to add a flush line in the new chlorine content tank for the amount of $54,487.21 and authorize the mayor to execute all necessary documents.
I second it.
So is it, I mean, what you just said, we're less than the 5% on a change order, which is what you say is kind of standard, which is a good thing.
Mhm.
Is this something that our system needs because we're irrigating farmers' fields during the summer months compared to other systems that you have worked on?
Yes, that's part of it. So it's a combination of two things. One, you are irrigating the farmers' fields, but you're only doing it sporadically. So there's long periods where there's no movement at all. Now, a lot of chlorine contact tanks are big concrete tanks that might be 10, 12 feet deep. In a tank like that, it wouldn't matter that you got a little bit of settlement down at the bottom because it wouldn't get stirred up because you got 10, 12 feet of water above it. But we have a pipe, which is hydraulically a lot better. And you might ask, well, why doesn't everybody do that? It's because it takes a lot of room. You got to string out that pipe all over the place. Most people don't have that room, so they make a compact chamber, which is a deep concrete tank that's sort of like a zigzag, actually. It's got walls in it to make the flow go around. So it's a combination of several items. The type of tank we have and the irrigation, and that it's very sporadic.
Yeah, and just a point of clarification, I just remember this from the past too. I don't want to, I want to make sure that we're not looking at the irrigation as a negative because it also helps with the discharge rates and
Oh,
there's a reason for doing that. Because
the irrigation is a great thing. The city is not allowed to discharge during the summer because the river flow is too low. And so your options are you store it all, or you store it and find some way to discharge. And right now you do that combination of storage and discharge. And by the way, we are raising the elevation of the dikes so you have more storage. So it'll help in the summertime. But you do both of those things. And without the irrigation, you need a whole lot more storage.
I understand that this is a small percentage of the whole bill, but just for information's sake, which revenue budget, which budget will we be taking this from?
This will be from the capital project for the grant.
Okay. So it'll be from the CIF,
Sorry,
Capital Improvement Fund?
Capital Improvement Fund where the grant is.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Terrell, how do you vote?
Yes.
Counselor Thompson Riser?
Yes.
Counselor Erickson, how do you vote?
Yes.
Counselor Ward Mullen?
Yes.
Counselor Skipper?
yes.
Mayor Watkins? All in favor, motion passes.
Thank you. I'm actually going to hand this over to Scott. This is planning related, and we just have a timeline of early August before the council meets again. And that is why it is time sensitive in front of you tonight. And I want to thank the planning commissioners again for their patience for us getting to the TSP.
Well, thank you, Shannon. Mayor, members of council, and members of the Planning Commission as well. This topic does relate to the Planning Commission. Yes, as Shannon mentioned, this is a grant, a window of time that we have to submit a grant proposal for the city of Carlton specific to housing capacity analysis. I have a short PowerPoint presentation. It was also, slides were included as part of your packet. But very short here, just a 1,000-foot overview of what housing capacity analysis is. I'll just kind of ask for the next slide there. We can get that. So there's a summary overview, and as part of your packet of materials tonight, you have a staff memo that describes what it is in a nutshell there. But really that last sentence there, housing capacity analysis is an assessment of the housing needs, capacity, and includes an inventory, determination, and analysis of that housing need. It's basically like the transportation systems plan. It is a 20-year forecast of need. So it is the document for the housing chapter of the comprehensive plan, just like the transportation systems plan is the analysis and document that supports the transportation chapter of the comprehensive plan. Next slide, please. There's some key components of housing capacity analysis and kind of bullet list those there in the slide. It's first a review of the demographics of each community, the various trends there, what housing types are available and preferred. Building lands inventory, BLI, that's an important part as we subtract a lot of lands that are encumbered with sensitive areas, floodplains, and things like that. There's as I mentioned, it's a 20-year forecast. One of the reasons in support of this grant proposal is that Carlton's last housing capacity analysis was conducted approximately 18 years ago. So the life of the current capacity analysis done back in about 2007 is about to end. Goes into capacity assessment, looks at lands that are vacant and planned for residential and how much land remains to accommodate the forecasted need. You look at the residential zone, but also looking at agricultural holding zones. That's the particular zone and plan is kind of earmarked for a future conversion to residential when certain circumstances are there. And then you have the opportunity to review comprehensive plan policies, just the same as you're reviewing tonight and in the hearings to come for the transportation systems plan. There'll be an update of the housing chapter of the comprehensive plan. And then finally, housing production strategies. This goes beyond policies. It's a matter of how you plan to execute some of the policies. It's a little bit more into the specific, the action steps that you would take to go forward and try to encourage housing in the community. Next slide, please. Building land inventory, that is where we again just sort of take out and subtract a lot of known resources. Floodplain is very known that we can subtract. Any known wetlands out there that have been inventoried as such would be subtracted. Also, what kind of on the bottom there, any future planned public facility locations, what you have as part of the documentation tonight for the future streets plan of the city, you take out those streets that are planned to go through property. So you really truly have a net area of vacant land. Next slide. I want to switch over to what we're looking at here right now, which is just a grant application. There's kind of a commitment that's to go forward with this, assuming the city receives the grant. It is a competitive grant. A lot of cities are applying for this. And housing capacity analysis is eligible. It is also a listed priority to the application. No funding, no matching grant funds are necessary. Deadline is coming up. That's why we're bringing this up tonight. And then we would find out roughly October when, if we got the grant or not. There are some disadvantages and advantages of going forward with this. If you can go to the next slide there. Advantage. So yeah, it would at least some cost savings there that if the city were otherwise to do this on its own, you're saving some money that is also beneficial for due process. If the grant is awarded, we're to follow various tasks and steps that are necessary as described by rule and statute. And then the funding period's pretty healthy there of 2 years. Next slide. Some disadvantages. The Department of Land Conservation and Development, they get to select the consultant. And there are various administrative tasks that are necessary, reports, milestones with any grant. And tasks deliverable to the satisfaction of DLC. There's a contract and certain nuances not made apparent. That's kind of in reference to a lot of rulemaking that has yet to occur. The methodology for housing capacity analysis, it's very prescriptive. It's one that a lot of cities throughout the state have not been too happy with. It's come into some challenges, and there's some finite details that have yet to be made apparent. So that's what that's referring to in the bullet. Next slide, please. One of the things that may be required, we don't know exactly, but advisory committee, just as there's an advisory committee that's been formed for the TSB, similarly, there might be the need to form an advisory committee for housing capacity analysis. This is a good thing. Sometimes difficult to get volunteers to commit, especially in a small city. But lots of benefits, technical expertise, you get a balance of perspectives, and just got a picture there of what I processed about 4 years ago when I was a planning director at Dallas, the housing needs analysis there. And there's a group of really good people that provided excellent input in that particular case. Next slide. Also, lots of meetings, outreach, that would be part of the tasks, responsibility of the city to perform various things, not just public hearings, but doing, well, kind of like what we're doing out here, work sessions, and then also similar to what we've done with the TSB in having the public open houses, opportunities to showcase what the city is doing and a general understanding of what TSB is. And similarly, we would have a public open house on what housing needs analysis is all about. Next slide. How it achieves council goals. There is a goal too. I think I answered this more so in the materials that the Planning Commission and the City Council received tonight with respect to how it answers one particular goal, and there is the interest to increase housing and livability in the city there. As I mentioned, the I don't know if I could say it, demographics and the trends in housing. It's a learning experience. There's an opportunity to again reevaluate the policies in the comprehensive plan, and to look at the means of increasing land supply for promoting choice in housing types there. So I think that's it for the presentation. We are requesting tonight a council action that would authorize the mayor to sign a letter that indicates that the council is in support of the grant proposal, indicating that, yeah, if it is awarded, you would initiate legislative proceedings to move forward. It wouldn't be a fast thing, as it would go in and get that 2-year period, as I mentioned. Yeah, that's what we're looking for. We would put with the council's action and support, we would put together the grant application in the next week or so. Happy to answer any questions.
Do we have a motion?
Madam Mayor, I would like to move that we go ahead and vote on your signing of the letter to support the grant application proposal and save our city some money.
Thank you. Is there a second?
It's me, second.
Is there any discussion? Yes.
So it sounds like there would be considerable staff time involved in doing this housing needs analysis, which would also, I mean, beyond the grant, doesn't pay for all of that additional staff time. Am I right? Or is that included in your grant?
So good question. Most of it would go to the hired consultant that would prepare the material. It may be that staff time, perhaps my time or whoever is the staff planner, might be reviewing some of the work that's prepared, preparing notices and staff reports and ensuring the process is done in accordance with the law. But taking a less direct role than the consultant. Most of the money of that 45,000 was just a guess, but it's at least that for the time that you would pay for a private consultant to prepare all the work.
Thank you.
Are there, yes.
So just to follow up on that a little bit. So if we, move forward and apply for the grant, would it be at that time when we're awarded it that we would have firmer numbers on what the fiscal impact would be from our perspective? And if you're awarded it and we see that, man, these numbers are outrageous or crazy, can we then reject the grant, or does that?
Yes, you could. So there's a Q&A as part of the packet. With Carleton's population under 10,000, you're not obligated to do this analysis. You are obligated under state law to provide the number of houses. It's kind of a strange predicament the way that the state law is written, as all cities throughout the state are given a number. Carleton has a number of a 20-year supply. And so there's this general obligation to fulfill the housing need of 20 years, yet the actual needs analysis is only encumbered on cities of 10,000 people or more. So you do have a back out of not doing it. I think the answer to that is part of the way that we answered it in the staff memo is that it doesn't give us the tools that we need, us staff, in talking to those who are interested in developing in the community, the ability to say, yeah, we have various areas available. It's really a good thing to know. We see the benefits of this, knowing the land that will be available. Again, something that hasn't been done for a while, so it should answer some questions that we have. So, but yes, to answer Councilor Skipper, your question directly, yes, you would have the ability to back out.
Are there any other? Okay.
So to follow up on that, and you might not be able to give me a great answer, and I totally understand that. But this is part of the frustration for me, is that, we're not required to do it, but we are required to plan for 20 years. So how do cities do that without these housing needs analysis?
A good question, and it's a paradox that I don't have the answer to. And it is one that a lot of cities are frustrated with. The good thing is that there's a healthy amount of money that the governor has allocated to this that may or may not be available in the following years. It's a 2-year biennium that's coming up here. Carlton's been very good with grants. We have one active right now, a TGM grant for the TSP, so we feel pretty good with getting it as far as the opportunity being here. But yeah, it is kind of a strange predicament that cities are in. So I don't have an answer.
Yes, Counselor.
Just quickly, in our comprehensive plan update process and our code update process, it seems like the community made pretty clear the types of housing that we wanted. Our urban growth boundary hasn't changed, so there's a finite amount of land. Our zoning hasn't changed considerable. I mean, I feel like we are pretty much know where we can build and where we can't at this point.
Yeah, very good. I mean, there have been a lot of communities out there that have been resistant to change and adding various housing types to its development code. So bravo, Carlton. I applaud what has been done here to update the development code, introducing cottage clusters and other things. And so just kind of my gut reaction is that the development code will not need to be updated. It's really a matter of the analysis behind the comprehensive plan that we are this housing capacity analysis to study whether the land inside the urban growth boundary is sufficient for 20 years. My guess is that it probably is. It may, what I think that, gut reaction, I haven't done anything than eyeball things, is that some land that might be planned agricultural holding may have to be rezone, replan to residential. That's my guess out of this.
Are there any other questions? Comments? Yes.
Oh, let me figure this out. As of right now, we apply for this. Let's say we get it. We have a meeting. Staff tells us it's going to cost us astronomical amount for staff time. We then can say, no, send the money back. Yes or no?
Yeah, I believe you can. I've encountered the situation before where, yeah, the grant requests, things just didn't materialize. It's best with a grant application that you take your best step forward. That's what we'll be doing with a grant, having a letter from the it's sort of one of those things that the application form itself says, answer kind of how the grant meets this criteria and also show that the community is behind this. So I think that DLCD has encountered that situation before, is that communities back out. So hence, this is why I'm giving you this nutshell version of what it is. To hope that you're interested in it, to carry forward with it. If, the grant is awarded, we would come back and say, yeah, here it is. And we probably would know a little bit more about the grant, what the conditions are, a little bit more on the contract language as well. The council could back out.
Okay, or the city could just, the staff could do on their own, a smaller scale, to figure out a little more about what we do and don't have, not go into this big production with a outside company.
Yeah, there are certain things that we'll have answered, whether or not we need to form like an advisory committee. There's a lot of work behind that. There are minutes that need to be prepared. There's lots of things that Amy does behind the scenes that you never see, but it's time. So there would be some things that we would look at and say, well, do we really need an advisory committee? How can we cut shave some of the costs off?
Okay, do we have a vote?
Just to clarify, since this is an action item, or is there a motion on the
Or
floor?
do we need a motion? We have a motion on the.
There has been a motion in a second, so if discussion is over, it's ready for vote.
Okay. Anybody going to start?
Do we just, if we're not roll calling, aye, yes.
Yes.
Are we not roll calling?
We're not roll calling.
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion carries. Thank you. All righty. Item D, transportation plan update and presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, I'm going to hand this right over to Eddie to get us started in TSP for the reason we are all looking forward tonight.
Provided they're there. Hello, there we go.
Hey, can folks hear me? Okay, I think that's a yes. Good evening, counselors and commissioners. Thanks for the opportunity to meet with you again to talk about the transportation system plan update. I know we ran short on time last time, so today the agenda has us jumping right back in, but also providing a bit of background for anybody new in the audience that would like to follow along. So without further ado, I do have a presentation pulled up. Let me share my screen and then we can launch right in. Okay, can folks see that?
We can see it, Eddie.
Okay, great. And I apologize on my end, I'm getting a little bit of a delay on the slide, so I'll try to advance through these as quickly as possible. Okay, so just to touch quickly on the agenda. So once again, we went over this last time 2 weeks ago, but I will be providing a very brief overview of the TSP just to make sure everybody's on the same page. And then we'll jump right into where we left off at the previous meeting. So I will recap some of the key themes that we heard at joint work session number 2. I'll spend just a brief amount of time on that. I'll check in with you all to make sure I caught everything, and then we will jump back into the heart of the discussion, which is really the draft implementing ordinances, specifically the cross sections. So at our last meeting, we were able to get through the proposed amendments to the municipal code. The big piece remaining to gain your consensus on and your input is regarding the cross section. So we'll spend about an hour on that. And then with the remaining time, we will touch on the funding strategy and the draft TSP and next steps. I know that there were some issues at the previous meeting regarding the packet. So hopefully you've had an opportunity to review the revised packet that includes the draft implementing ordinances and the draft funding strategy in their entirety. So if you have any questions, please refer to your packet. And of course, as we get into the discussion, I'll be happy to stop and answer questions as they arise. And just give me 1 second. I am seeing captions on my screen and it's in the way of the button. Give me 1 second. Maybe I will just click. I think that should work. I apologize, folks. Let me reshare my screen. I can't advance the slide. Okay. Okay. Okay, so once again, for the uninitiated, this project is a joint partnership between you, the City of Carlton, and the Oregon Department of Transportation. This project is partly funded by the Oregon Department of Transportation Growth Management Program, Transportation Growth Management Program, which is a major program in the state that funds a lot of the long range transportation and land use planning in the state. I work for a company called Parametrics. We're a civil engineering and planning firm based in the Pacific Northwest, and we're also partnered with another firm, Urban Lens Planning, supporting land use. All right, and for anyone that hasn't been following along to date, what is a transportation system plan? So transportation system plan is, like I mentioned, a long-range plan to guide the city's transportation system and investments in that system over the next 20 years. The key things that you get at the end of a TSP process are a list of projects, programs, and policy directions that help address transportation needs in the community for the next 20 years. As you'll see, as we get into the cross sections, the TSP does intend to take a holistic and system-wide look, meaning that we're addressing not only transportation needs for vehicles, but also for people walking, using wheelchairs, bicycling, and using transit. And this meeting is one of many meetings that we've had throughout this process in an effort to have a collaborative and transparent process between us, the consultant team, ODOT, the City of Carlton, and local partners. And last but not least, what you get at the end of the consensus building phase for those projects, programs, and policies is also an actionable strategy for how the city can actually move forward, fund the recommendations that come out of the TSP, and actually move towards implementation. So that's core to what we're going to be talking about today with regard to the city's municipal code. This should look familiar from last time. I've moved the little arrow down a little bit on the bottom right, but what you see here is an overall project timeline. It's about a year and a half total. Right now, we're at the very beginning of the adoption process, where we will be presenting the draft transportation system plan to the community. We'll be opening up to public feedback as well as your feedback through the course of 2 public hearings coming up this summer and early fall. All right, so getting into the recap. So I'll actually start back at our May 12th meeting, which was the first time that we met with this group. At that juncture, we asked for your feedback on the proposed transportation system improvements, essentially the long menu of potential fixes that we could offer to address transportation issues in the community. Some of the key things that we talked about and spent time on were the intersection improvements proposed at the intersections of Yamhill, Pine, and Wilson. Of course, everybody in the community knows that these are priority intersections and that there's a lot of safety concerns there. So these were of prime importance. We also talked about recommendations around the pedestrian and bicycle network. We also heard directly about the removal of some projects that we had previously identified, such as B4 and some priority considerations for bike paths along Oregon 47. So we'll talk about that when we get to the cross sections. So from that meeting, we've incorporated your feedback. We took all of that feedback back and baked it into the planning level cost estimates, the draft implementing ordinances that we're talking about today, and the draft TSP that you'll be seeing very soon. At our previous meeting 2 weeks ago, we gathered your feedback on our first draft of the implementing code amendments and funding strategy. We spent considerable time talking about the street cross sections. We heard about the importance of landscape strips and street trees, consideration for fire and emergency access in cul-de-sacs, and also footprint considerations for new and existing collector streets. We also got your feedback on the code amendment topics that Robin covered at our previous meeting, and we've gone ahead and incorporated all of that feedback into the cross sections that we'll talk about today. Importantly, like I mentioned at the top of the meeting, we didn't make it through all of the cross sections, so I've stripped out some of the previous discussion that we've had and really dedicated as much time as possible to the cross sections. Okay, so just to reiterate, the purpose of today's meeting is once again to review and gather your direct input on the updated cross sections. This is very important because there's really only 2 other junctures left before we present this to the public. So there is a technical workshop that we'll be having between city staff, the consultant staff, and ODOT to go over the draft TSP recommendations in detail, including the cross sections. From that, we'll be incorporating everything that we've heard from the community, from the project advisory committee meetings, and from these meetings to make sure that we're getting this right. So this is one of the last times that we can meet in this format to discuss your input and recommendations on the cross sections and overall plan elements. And I guess the point here being that whatever we get into today will directly inform the draft TSP and hopefully set it up for success when we present it for adoption. So it's an important discussion. And I would really like to encourage everybody to participate and speak up if you have opinions about what you're about to see. Okay, so that is the preamble. I tried to go through it as quickly as possible. Before getting into the subject matter, does anyone have any questions or concerns? I think I see a hand.
I just have a quick question. Are we going to discuss each street in order? So we'll go back and discuss, for example, collector streets first and then local streets. And is that how we're going to frame this discussion?
Yes, Counselor. The only difference is that I was going to walk back through the arterial street recommendations one more time, just because we did update the visual illustrations just to be a little bit clearer. So I would like to touch on that, and I believe Council President Skipper had some recommendations on the utilities for arterial streets that we also incorporated. So I do want to touch on those, but I suspect that we'll spend most of our time talking about the collector streets and local streets since we didn't get to those last time.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, Mayor, am I good to proceed? Okay. All right, so this is also a bit of a review. Oh, I'm sorry, there was a delay in the sound. Was there a comment or a question?
No, just go ahead. I'm
Okay.
fine.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, so I did want to just provide a quick overview on where this is all coming from. And again, I recognize that there might be people in the audience that weren't here last time, so I just want to make sure there's understanding. So the Transportation System Plan is required by the Oregon Transportation Planning Rule. It's a revised statute in our state. And the requirement includes updates to two key elements of your local policy. So one is direct updates to the transportation chapter in your comprehensive plan. So the comprehensive plan was updated last year, as you all know. It's very important that there's consistency between the comp plan and the TSP, given that the TSP will functionally serve as the transportation element of the comp plan. So if you refer to your packets, there is the transportation chapter in its entirety that we've included. The first version of it is the updated version, and the secondary version is the original text that has been documented in track changes. So you can see specifically where we changed language. Like we went over last time, the key things to note here are that we updated the goals, policies, and objectives concurrent with what we've arrived at for the TSP process. All of this was stuff that we heard directly from the community through a couple of meetings, an open house, and online engagement. And the other piece being direct updates to the development code to support alignment with this transportation planning rule, and also to aid the city in implementing the recommendations of the TSP. The code itself also includes the cross-section elements, which is what we'll be talking about today. But the point here being that this is going to be baked into your code, which is why we're having this additional meeting, and why I'm trying to iterate how important it is that we hear from all of you tonight. And I think I already mentioned this, but the key updates in the transportation chapter that we talked about last time are the goals, policies, and objectives updates. We did make some minor updates to the trends section and some additional text to just clarify the relationship between the comp plan, the code, and the TSP. All right, so the next section gets into the cross sections themselves, so maybe I'll stop very quickly. If anyone does have any additional comments or questions on the comp plan chapter, now's a great time.
I think you're fine.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. All right, so moving on. So like I mentioned, the updated street standards are where we're picking up Just a few bullet points to keep in mind as we go through these. So these street standards will aid in TSP implementation and in your ability to negotiate with developers as development comes into town. It helps us address some of the key transportation needs that we've identified throughout the process, namely safe routes to school and increasing that safe network from the surrounding neighborhoods to the school. As we've heard about in the previous meetings, there's an important nexus with regard to planting areas and street trees for stormwater mitigation, shade, beautification, etc. And also the inclusion of buffers for increasing safety in bicycle and pedestrian zones. We've also tried to incorporate design flexibility on the special transportation area, being the downtown segment between Yamhill and Pine. So where we can, we've tried to preserve right of way to accommodate additional features like utilities and trees. So I'm hearkening back to Council President Skipper's comment from the last meeting. And then we also want to make sure that these cross sections are flexible enough to accommodate different footprints and needs as the city grows and as development opportunities occur. So trying to be specific about the minimum widths for travel lanes, sidewalks, and landscape strips, while still allowing for some maximum right-of-way allowances for additional features as is appropriate. Okay, so I do have these slides incorporated into the presentation. I actually think I'll jump into the illustrations first, and then if people have questions about the specific tables, I'd be happy to go back. And once again, you have all of this in your packets in track changes, so you can see your existing standards and where we've recommended changes. But for the sake of discussion, I think we can move on to the illustrations. Okay, so for arterial streets, what's changed since last time? So we were asked to reconsider bike facilities on Oregon 47 due to safety concerns. Our updated response from your previous recommendations is the shared travel lanes or the Sharo environment that we had included in the downtown area have been removed from the current sections. However, we have maintained on-street bike facilities through the non-downtown segments of Main Street. And we've also retained 65 feet of right-of-way for utilities and street tree possibilities per your recommendations. So what does that look like? So here we have the updated cross sections for arterial streets. So this is Oregon 47, and this is the non-STA or non-downtown segment. So your existing standard shows 65 feet of total right-of-way. One of the global changes that we've made across all of these sections is that we've tried to specify the travel lane widths to clarify where the additional right-of-way is coming from for things like curb, gutter, parking, etc. So like you can see in the top example there, your current code specifies 50 feet of pavement width, but the exact travel lane width is not specified. The current standard does also include 6 feet for bikeways and 6 feet for sidewalks. And the updated section really just tries to clarify how that would lay out in a more typical section. So here we've recommended 11-foot travel lanes, 1 foot on each side for buffer or shy. So this isn't a requirement that the buffer is striped, but it gives you the opportunity to include buffers if needed. We've retained the 6 feet for the bikeways, and we've also incorporated basically 2 feet on each side for shy distance and also curb and gutter facilities. Like I mentioned at the top of this, we have maintained that 65-foot right-of-way, even though what you see on the screen is actually less than 65 feet. And again, that's to preserve some flexibility if there are utility needs or the desire to do additional landscaping or what have you. Any comments or questions about this section?
Yes, Counselor, go ahead.
Yeah, so just to clarify, the additional space for landscaping would be on the outside edge of each sidewalk, so the non-street side of the sidewalk?
And I can't see the screen, but was that you, Councilor Terrell?
Yes.
Thank you, Councilor. No, not exactly. So for the purposes of the illustration, we put the extra space, if you will, at the back of sidewalk, but realistically, the configuration could be changed. I think ideally, if landscape strips were incorporated, they would be done in a way that is consistent with the other sections that do include landscaping, which typically has them between the curb and the actual sidewalk width, or sidewalk, the sidewalk.
Right. And so given that, that stretch of road is already developed,
Right.
it would, any landscaping, we would have to remove sidewalk or anything to do that, correct?
Exactly, Counselor, and you're getting right to the heart of what I think we've been, I don't want to say struggling with, but what one of the main challenges has been with this is that, we recognize the need for additional street trees in the community. Certainly, there's a whole host of benefits that you're all aware of. We also want to make sure that what we're recommending, especially for your major facilities and your arterials, is realistic. And we talked a bit about this last time, right? I mean, the maintenance requirements for street trees is significant. The funding challenges are real. And again, we want to figure out how we can incorporate that flexibility while not promising something that is unlikely to be built, especially in an area that's already been developed. So we'll get to some of the sections coming up here, particularly the new streets where we think we can be more aggressive in requiring landscape strips. But for this particular section, you're correct that it's not exactly shown because we recognize that this is already built out and it would be a big move to incorporate it now.
Thank you. Are there, yes, Counselor Erickson.
Yeah, so your bottom picture is what you're proposing or what we're looking at.
Yes, Counselor.
So on Highway 47 from Main Street south, you've got within town, you've already got sidewalks pretty much on both sides, a dirt strip, and then you've got telephone poles up and down that section of town. Does this bottom layout accommodate to leave those telephone poles in the existing place?
Good question, Counselor. These are planning level, if I'm being honest. So I think the exact location of the utility poles is not something I can speak to. What we have tried to do, like I mentioned, is, we're essentially leaving 10 to 13 feet of essentially flex space to accommodate utility poles, landscaping, any other obstructions in the right of way that are already there or that would need to be constructed with redevelopment. So, I guess the take home here is there's room to accommodate those poles. How those would lay out in this section would require preliminary engineering, and we're really still at the planning phase, so I can't totally answer that.
Do you have another question?
So then if we put this in, that we choose this bottom section, and then we need to move those poles, there's a fee funding problem there. And isn't the end result for this section of road decided and up to ODOT?
Correct. So this is an ODOT facility. So we would need to seek concurrence with the state agency to make sure that we were in line with their recommendations and guidelines. I think we are, but like I mentioned at the top of the meeting, we do have an additional workshop planned with ODOT and the city to make sure that these designs will fly, essentially. And to your, I guess the first part of your question is yes. I mean, effectively by adopting this kind of a standard, what the city is effectively saying is this is a cross section that we support on this segment of roadway. We recognize that by adopting it, it is now substandard, but when, funding and opportunity align, this is the kind of development that we'd like to see.
Thank you, Counselor.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting that the existing arterial plan is substandard to what is actually there now. So it's really, I don't want to say no different, but it's just an update from the existing, if I'm making sense.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Yes, Counselor.
I have a question, Eduardo. On the existing one, the bikeway is 6 feet on each side. On the proposed one now with that side and your buffer becomes 8 feet. So your lane is only 11 feet. We have a lot of heavy traffic trucks semi trucks, and also farming equipment going through those, that road. So I don't know what are the chances to eliminate that 1 foot shy of buffer next to the sidewalk on each side, so we can keep the lane width of 12 feet instead of 11.
Mhm.
I just see a lot of farming equipment going through town and through those roads all the time. And it is pretty scary to drive around those rigs. So I don't know how much that buffer, the 1 foot next to the sidewalk, is necessary.
Thank you, Counselor. Yeah, I hear you loud and clear. So when we looked at the travel lane recommendations, again, given that this is an ODOT facility, we did consult the ODOT Highway Design Manual for basically minimum recommendations for travel lane widths in this kind of environment. So while this is the minimum, I recognize your concern in that there is a lot of specialized equipment moving through this area. So it's something we can look at. For sure. I think the other thing that I can mention is regarding the shy, I think those are fairly generous shies. Even if you were just doing a regular or a typical bikeway striping, sometimes those can only be 4 to 6 inches in total width. So you might not actually use that entire shy. Similarly for the shy that is curb tight, sometimes that can differ and be less than a foot, depending on public works standards. So this is drawn fairly generously or conservatively to provide kind of a safe cross-section recommendation, but we can certainly look at ways of reducing some of the on-street elements to accommodate that 12-foot travel lane. So thank you.
Thank you.
You have it. Okay, Counselor Erickson.
I just want to know, on each of these cross sections, are we going to have a vote to say yay or nay if we're going to go with this or not?
On each of the cross sections?
That's the question.
Eddie,
So-
how did you envision getting consensus from the council and the commissioners on these cross sections?
Say that again?
I was asking Eddie how he envisioned getting consensus from the council and the commissioners on each of these cross sections. Was it a vote or some other means?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So, I would, I guess, start by saying that I would obviously defer to the council and the planning commission on this. I mean, it's your community, so it should be up to you all. But what I would recommend is that, given the number of sections that we have and the aggressive timeline that we're on, I don't think we want to get into a situation where we're taking individual votes on the specific cross sections. We may never get consensus, frankly. I think what would be a constructive use of our time would be what we're doing now. I think we've done our best to take everything that we're hearing in these meetings back to the shop and incorporating it to the best of our ability. The first public hearing, which is slated to be for the Planning Commission, is on August 11th. And at that meeting and in the lead up to it, you'll have an opportunity to provide direct written feedback on the draft TSP and all of its elements. So I think there's this meeting and there's that deliverable on which you can provide written detailed feedback that we will, again, take back to the shop. We'll work with Amy and Shannon to get incorporated and we'll basically do our best. But yeah, I think it would be really hard to do votes for individual cross sections. We might never get to resolution on that.
Counselor?
Yeah, quick question, and Eddie, maybe this will be helpful for only me, but maybe some other counselors as well, because I'm just in the process of moving forward. How does that look? I totally understand the 65-foot minimum right away. When we talk about minimums, what does that process look when, I think sometimes you get hung up on this cross section here, but it clearly does say 11-foot minimum. Is that something that it goes before Planning Commission, or that's something that's dealt with, if we decide, hey, we need 12 feet? When does that happen? I guess that's where I think as we go through this, you see this quotations of minimum, and I totally understand there's more room for greenways and things like that. But at what point does that get updated as streets get developed?
Absolutely. And I think that's a great question because, you know, it's one thing to show what these, again, planning level cross sections look like, but how they're actually implemented is sort of a different thing. And I would also invite Scott to chip in, given his experience working with development applications in the city. But generally, my answer would be, you know, you want to know what your bookends are when you're addressing public works upgrades or development applications. By saying minimum, you're basically saying that to any developer or to any potential project that you will not accept anything less than that width, given that, you know, it's an arterial functional classification. It's designed to carry a certain volume and type of traffic, and you basically can't compromise on that without having a negative impact on your overall transportation system. The maximum is exactly what you said. It provides some flexibility in saying maybe the city needs more than that minimum, and that's where you would enter into developer negotiations under the purview of your city engineer and public works department. The question before you today, I think, is 11 feet minimum enough, right? Like, is that an acceptable minimum? And do you feel comfortable moving forward with negotiations for more? Or would you like to raise the bar and make it 12? Again, I think a lot of that comes down to the purview of your local engineering department and public works department. But these are, again, sort of intended as bookends for what are the acceptable minimums and maximums in your community. So I would actually invite, again, Scott or someone else from the community that might have some experience dealing with this specifically, on how that might play out in a real world scenario.
Scott?
Yeah, thank you, Eddie. I'll just add, actually, Eddie did a really good job of describing the scenario there. And certainly it's good to have sort of a range there, maybe a range more so for capital improvement projects that the council may look at in the future. When it comes to development applications, generally speaking, yeah, there's more focus to the minimum than there is to the maximum, and really difficult to negotiate that, especially if it's a residential project where it's subject to clear and objective standards and the protections of the law apply. So, so there is a lot of focus more so to what that minimum is as far as occurrence. It's going to be more so what you see. I mean, it's more costly to do a wider street. So, so that's kind of what my general reaction is, although, yeah, Eddie certainly summed it up really well. I want to also just touch on, there is, yeah, as Eddie mentioned, the hearings that are forthcoming. As much as can be ironed out, though, as far as direction that the council and the planning commission have on this, the more so we can produce a document that's really hearings ready and that the public can look at and understand, and that you're really receiving public testimony. So yeah, I don't think I agree, not a vote necessary on each and every one of these cross sections, but a general good feedback to get to a document that's ready for hearing.
Thank you, Scott. Is there any other? Yes.
I'd like to acknowledge Commissioner Chavez's comment on that we are still a farm town and we do have large farm equipment moving through town. Feedback that I've heard from farmers is that they use streets that are safe for them. And so they avoid, for example, the downtown streets and try to go back roads to get through town. My other comment is those sections of road are still within city limits, regardless of them being an arterial and a highway. And so we actually want we want the minimum amount of travel lane to really slow down people. If you see a big farm equipment coming, you're going to slow down, you're going to move over. The painted buffers for the bicyclists, it's okay for the cars to drive on those. That's what they're for. They're a buffer. They're not. And the bicyclists will be curb type as best they can typically. So I feel like the 11-foot travel lanes are a good minimum. And I would recommend painting the buffer stripes for the bicycles. Thank you.
Yes, Counselor.
With this, I just spent some time in Portland on Burnside, and I noticed the streets, they were within the 12-foot. Bike lanes were 4 foot at best, and they did have this painting on it above a foot. I guess I look at it, if you were to paint an 8-foot fog line, or not 8-foot, 8-inch fog line down the side, kind of like what we have now, it gives the bicyclists in their mind, at least from all of my years of doing it, you ride to the right of that line, to where a foot of that and then 6 feet wide to ride a bicycle. If you can't stay within 4 feet, you shouldn't be on the highway anyway. It's simple as that. I rode for years. And then you've got 2 feet for another, what is it, a shy and a gutter. Yeah, the lanes should be, as I see, 12-foot, reduce the bike lane and get rid of a 1-foot strip of paint to allow more room, because regardless, I still see large combines go through right downtown Carlton. They take up everything.
Yeah.
They don't all go to Coote Street, or Monroe Street. You still see them. We're still a farming community. We're still going to deal with this large stuff. As long as we have 47 going through town, you're still going to have double trailers going through, trying to make the corner here, and at the other end of town, running over sidewalks, having problems. So the street widths need to be on those streets at least 12 feet in my mind.
That is a street away. Easy
Okay.
emergency. Sorry, I'm sorry. Excuse me, Mayor.
That's all. That's where I'm at with it.
Are there any other comments? Yes.
I agree completely, especially as we're talking about Oregon 47. I would like to see, if I was asking for, or if I was in Eddie's shoes asking for feedback, I would like to see what he could do to make this section of arterial larger, at least 12-foot minimum travel lanes. Because I also was in a meeting 2 years ago, or 3, 4, whatever it was, when we were talking about the reroute of Oregon 47. And the opinion of the farming community was very vocal about the need to get through and how bad it is right now. So I would hate to set a minimum, because again, developers are going to start at the minimum. So I would like to see that minimum increased.
Counselors, I have a question for you, if I may. I'm counting the votes here, even though I said we're not voting. So I guess I want to do a temperature check. I mean, if we were able to increase the minimum travel lane width for these 2 lanes to 12 feet and essentially leave all of the other elements the same, we could effectively do that without much of a change in what you're seeing here. You know, like you can see on the screen there, the last bullet leaves 10 feet of flex. I think the actual calculation is 13 feet. So really, we would still have approximately 10 feet for utilities or other kinds of right-of-way obstacles. So would that feel like a happy medium where we're preserving some on-street bicycle facilities, we're providing that extra space for curb and shy and stormwater, but increasing that minimum for farming needs? Would that feel like a good happy medium, do you think?
Shall we poll here? Are we okay?
Voice vote?
It's just raise your hand.
I'm good with that.
Yeah, I agree.
Agree.
Okay.
All right, well, thank you, counselors. Yeah, we can absolutely update that. And you know, when we do take this back to the shop, if there's anything else that comes up in that reallocation of space, we'll certainly document it, and you'll have an opportunity to comment on it. So thank you.
Can I have a point of information? Just
One question,
Just
yeah.
a point of information.
Yeah.
Are we planning to require striping of some kind to designate the bike lane?
Good question, Counselor. I feel like we touched on this last time. So the way that your current standards are written are that they are dimensional requirements. So we don't get into striping design requirements or any other sort of public works type standards. So currently it's not required. But we do leave that dimensional standard there so that it can be painted, basically. And again, this is so that there's flexibility in the code for future planning commissions and city councilors, so that we're not overly prescriptive in what the design ought to be in every single scenario. I think that's certainly up for debate, but I think currently that has been our approach to not completely revamp your existing standards.
Okay,
I would strongly suggest on this stretch of road to have painted bike lanes. And what happens when developers are not required to paint the bike lane is they don't paint them, and then we have imaginary bike lanes that don't exist. So I am a very strong advocate, especially on an arterial where there's cars and farm equipment and cyclists interacting, that the cyclists are protected with a striped lane.
thank you. Yes.
I'm gonna not challenge you, Counselor Terrell, but I'm gonna recall back to the next meeting, and as we jump to the next slide, correct me if I'm wrong, but you did not feel comfortable with striping on Main Street. So now you're gonna have I just want to make sure I understand, striping for bike lanes on 47 until you hit Pine, and then they get into the lane of travel, and then they go back into a bike lane on 47.
So we're rerouting cyclists off of Main Street, so they're continuing straight past Ken Wright's.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay, yes. Let's let Counselor, Commissioner, thank you.
Commissioner Madrid, quick question, and I think you can get a 2-for-1 here. When we're looking at the arterials north and south of Main Street and east and west, and what I'm interested in is the sidewalks. Will this go to the city limits? Because the first map that we have shows the Oregon 47 legend, including that special transportation area. So north of Main Street downtown, south of Main Street downtown, which is Pine, and then east and west Main, how far will those sidewalks extend? Will it be to the city limit?
Yes, Commissioner. The entire TSP is limited to the urban growth boundary for the city. So
Thank you for that clarification.
Was that it, or did you have a question?
Yeah, I've just, back with the bike lane thing, it's just there's not a need for 12 inches. You can do a smaller fog line, and then if you just put some of and it looks nicer too than these big massive crosshatch striping down the roads. Just put some of those bicycle pictures on the road that tell people that this is a bike route. It's less intrusive, it looks nicer than all this crosshatching, white lines down the streets. And then you put all of this striping on the streets. To my knowledge, we're going to pay, the city has to pay to restripe that yearly or every other year, between $2.50 and $3 a foot, to have either an outside company do it, or eventually the city purchases equipment, hires a person to take care of that problem. So there's a maintenance fee there that somewhere we're going to have to come up with money to maintain these white stripes.
Okay. I think you can move on.
Okay, I'll go ahead and move on, but while I do, I'll just mention that, to the counselor's point about maintenance, you're absolutely right. You know, the maintenance requirements are real, and we, later on in today's, slide deck, we do have, some information on what the city currently spends on striping and how that might be used to support improvements like these. So I think that's an astute point. Anytime we're talking about these cross sections, is to think about, you know, what the trade-offs are in terms of maintenance and investment, right? Okay, so we already had a bit of a preview of this one. So this is the downtown section. So this is between Yamhill and Pine, Oregon 47. Above, you have your existing dimensional standards. So we have 10-foot sidewalks, parking. The standard does not currently enumerate the width for parking, nor does it for the travel lanes. All we have is that we have 40 feet of pavement to play with. So the proposed cross section maintains that 60 feet of right of way. Again, I'm thinking about Council President Skipper's previous notion to maybe not shrink these down too much so that we have some flexibility. And what we've done here is, again, we've tried to just clarify what the minimum widths ought to be. So again, based on sort of industry best practices and the ODOT Highway Design Manual, we've landed on 11 feet of minimum travel lane. This is one where, you know, we did think specifically about making it as narrow as possible, given that it is the downtown section and there is a desire to calm traffic through this area. At the same time, we can't go too narrow for all the reasons that you already mentioned. There's a lot of traffic. There is farm equipment that's moving through downtown. There's freight. So we want to make sure that it can still accommodate that level of traffic. So 11 feet is sort of the recommendation for that. 7 feet for intermittent parking lanes. So I believe this was an idea that was introduced by Councilor Terrell, where she recommended looking into basically a series of buffers that weave in and out throughout the right of way to preserve that on-street parking while also introducing spaces for other streetscape elements like trees. This cross section doesn't show that perfectly, but I do have an image to show you. And then otherwise, everything else is the same. So we still have 10 feet of sidewalks. And then once again, we've just tried to account for the necessary kind of shy curb and gutter distances that you'll need in any public works improvement. So as far as the intermittent parking lanes, here's an example, and I apologize, I couldn't find something better, but you know, a lot of the examples out there are very urban, like big city urban. And I wanted to find something that kind of had the flavor of a smaller town. But anyway, what you can see here is that you have, you know, the extension of the sidewalk or a curb extension. And in that area, there's a small tree that's been planted. And I think this is, you know, pretty similar to what you have currently in your downtown. I know there's some trees down there already. The benefit of this is that it doesn't require, you know, massively expanding or extending into the right of way, taking away valuable on-street parking, but it still preserves that opportunity for street trees, you know, as is appropriate. And also allows for on-street parking. So I think previously the recommendation was, you know, 2 to 3 cars, making sure that there's at least 2 to 3 continuous spaces for parking, and then looking into opportunities for, once again, extending into the right of way for other elements. Could be benches, it could be lighting, it could be a whole host of things. So I thought that was a pretty neat idea. So we went ahead and updated the cross sections to reflect that. But I recognize that making it official can be a bit daunting. So yeah, we certainly need to talk about this. And just as a preview, we did leverage this intermittent parking lane strategy in one of the collector street standards. So we'll talk about that in a few slides here. But what do you think for downtown? So this is, once again, between Yamhill and Pine on Main Street.
Counselor Skipper.
I'm okay with leaving it because I understand that there's flexibility. I do think that we're struggling with a very short stretch section of street that already has ADA bulb outs and things like that implemented. And we do currently have parking issues already for downtown. I fear that with ADAs and now these other intermittent, you know, bump outs, I don't know what else to call them, you're not going to have any parking downtown. I mean, it's already pretty limited as it is. I do like the idea. I think more so for like collectors, like we're going to discuss, but I think when we're talking about just this Main Street section, parking's already pretty limited down there, and I just personally don't feel this works for this section.
Counselor Erickson.
I 100% agree with Kevin that we've already struggled downtown parking. And just fix the tree problem. We can get the utilities underground, fix the sidewalks, put in some new trees, the proper tree. I think our problem will be solved, and you're going to save, because if we start taking parking away from downtown, this room will probably be full of all the owners of those businesses. Oh, I think downtown is set.
Counselor?
Yeah, I agree. When I was talking about the chokers and the neck down, I was specifically thinking of collector streets, of new collector streets. I feel like our downtown, that street configuration, it's already pretty pedestrian friendly with the bulb outs and the parking. I'm kind of good with it the way it is.
Any other comments? Okay.
Great. Well, not to be flip about this, but I think that sounds pretty unanimous for the most part. I mean, it sounds like we'll remove the intermittent designation for the parking lane. Otherwise, we're basically leaving everything as is. And again, the main improvement just being that we're just drawing a more detailed picture and making sure that you have that updated illustration in your code. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Just make sure that we retain our bulb outs so that our pedestrian crossings are clear and that we do replace our street trees.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and again, you know, this is getting to typical cross sections, so it shouldn't have implications for specific intersection treatments or ADA requirements. So it wouldn't necessarily affect that. If anything, to the point that I think the previous two counselors were making is this would introduce the opportunity for more bulbs, and it sounds like we don't necessarily need that. People are happy with the way things are now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. And before I move on, folks, I do also just want to mention that the other thing that we changed based on your direct feedback is we removed the sharrows from this section. If you remember, we previously had those little bicycle symbols on the roadway, and we did remove those as well. So I should have mentioned that.
Thank you.
All right, moving right along, folks. All right, so here we have the third and final arterial street cross section. So this is Main Street, not Oregon 47, right? So this is basically east and west of the downtown area. So this is another one where I don't believe we've really substantially changed anything. I think the difference is that we've just tried to be really clear about how much space it really takes to build a section to the general specifications that are already in your code. So once again, your current code doesn't have travel lane widths, it doesn't have parking lane widths, and it doesn't incorporate any allowances for curb, gutter, shy, things like that. So we've essentially gone in and added those in. Perhaps the one thing that might be sticking out in your minds as you see this now is that there is a stripe between the bikeway and the travel lane. So again, you know, this isn't intended to specify the type of striping. It could just be a regular fog line. It certainly does not need to take a whole foot, but the idea is that there's enough space in the right of way to accommodate a more comfortable bikeway environment, so that you know you're not in a cattle chute between parking and travel. Certainly up for debate if that needs to be narrowed up some more, but we've tried to keep this essentially the same. So I'll open it up for comments and feedback.
Yes, Susan.
I would like those bike lanes striped on that both those sections of street. And I am flexible. It doesn't have to be the hash ones if other counselors are more comfortable with just a fog line striping, but designated as a bike lane and marked as such and striped.
Any other comments? Hi. Grant?
So I'd like to, I guess, have you explain you put 6-foot bike lanes on 47, but 5-foot bike lanes on east-west. Is there any reasoning for your non-consistent and the bike lane sections?
Yes, sir. So the main reason is that again, we're trying to provide you with the smallest footprint possible, given that it's a small town character and we don't want, you know, unnecessarily wide bike lanes in your community. The wider bike lanes were recommended on Oregon 47, again, to seek alignment with ODOT's Highway Design Manual, which require wider bike lanes on state facilities. In the local sections of Main Street, we thought we could get away with essentially narrower bike lanes.
Okay,
Okay, then along with that also, if we're gonna run 12 feet up and down 47 and through Main Street, would it not then be to the same benefit for the farm equipment to run 12 feet east and west?
Counselor, I think that's a good point. So yeah, I'd like to hear from others, but I think that's a fair recommendation. I think given that these are all arterial functional classifications, I think that consistency is reasonable. So I would support that.
Eduardo, this is Commissioner Chavez, and same thing. I mean, 12 feet wide would be great because we're still having a lot of farming equipment coming on those sections of the road.
Thank you, Commissioner.
is that it? I think we're good.
All right, great. So before moving on, I'll just again kind of let me just repeat what I think I'm hearing. So let's update these to have consistent travel lane width, so 12 feet to match the Oregon 47 sections. And let's add some requirements for some amount of striping, right? It doesn't have to be a foot of hashing, but striped bike lanes are the requirement. That's kind of what I'm hearing for these sections.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay, great. Okay, and again, folks, you will have another bite at the apple, so to speak. So this isn't forever, but this is exactly the kind of feedback that's going to guide us in the right direction. So I appreciate the transparency. All right, so we're at 8 o'clock and we're getting into the collector streets. I can keep going. Do folks need like a 2-minute break, or are folks good to keep going?
Okay.
we're good.
Okay. All right, so collector streets. So again, this is similar to what we talked about last time, but what we heard was to do more to accommodate 5 feet or greater landscape strips for trees while balancing maintenance requirements. So, you know, to the previous comment about the cost, absolutely. I mean, for striping, for landscaping, this all costs money. So we're trying to find that balance. Like I mentioned previously, there's some benefit here in that there's a standard for new streets that would ostensibly be paid for by developers. So it's an opportunity for the city to get trees installed and paid for. So the response that we did based on that feedback is that we reverted some of the previous minimum landscape strip requirements to 5 feet. So at one point we had reduced them down to 2 feet. We heard from you very clearly at the last meeting that you needed more, so we brought it back up to 5. And we also incorporated 2-foot minimum strips into existing and school zone collectors for safety and minor stormwater management benefits. So just want to be clear that you know, the reason for this is that, again, we don't want to recommend standards that are unrealistic or would be prohibitively expensive to move forward with. So for the parts of your system that are already built out, you know, we think it's reasonable to incorporate some amount of stormwater infrastructure, but probably not to the full standard that you would expect in a new collector environment where you have you know, room to play with. The other recommendation that we heard from you, again, very clearly, was to update or replace the new collector street standard to address the wide footprint. So if you remember from the last meeting, we had a new collector street standard that we proposed at the 71-foot mark, which is what you currently have. And then we also had a narrow option. What we heard from you was basically throw away the new standard and adopt the alternate narrow option as the new collector street standard to achieve that narrower right of way that's more consistent with your local street character. So that's a lot of words. Let me show you what this looks like. Okay, so for existing streets, again, not a huge change here, but what we've done is incorporated some amount of landscape stripping, and we've made it optional. Again, recognizing that we're not going to retrofit your entire collector street system today, but if there's opportunities as spot improvements move forward or developer interest comes in, there's a path forward on stormwater management benefits. The other thing to note here, and again, we heard this directly from you last time, is no need for on-street bicycle lanes. Previously, we did show striped lanes, and we heard from you, most of the collectors' streets in town, especially the existing ones, are already relatively low volume, low speed, and simply making them shared travel lanes with sharrows would be adequate for most places. So we've updated the standard to reflect that.
Comments?
Yeah, comments.
So, I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
Yes.
Susan.
Go ahead. One of you.
Go ahead.
So for, I guess I'm a little bit confused. So we are doing standards for existing streets. So if there is some cash or opportunity, then we can restore some landscape strips or striping. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so for new collector streets that are now 71-foot right away and have a 7-foot parking lane, I believe those should have bicycle accommodations marked on the pavement. Because those are so wide. I mean, right now we have 46 feet of pavement, which it's just absurd. It's like a landing strip. So I would actually like to see some bike infrastructure on those existing ones as cash becomes available.
Thank you, Counselor.
Did we not change that 71 last meeting?
But not for existing.
Correct, but, okay. So this is for the new collector streets. I'm looking at it. If we were to shrink the sidewalk a little bit, we could increase the planting strip. And I'm not sure, why do we have this shy of 1 foot in between the curb gutter and the park lane? What is that for?
So it's just again, it's a shy, so there's not a perfectly clear response, but typically it's just an allowance to provide some space in the right of way to buffer between different elements. So for example, you wouldn't want to travel, curb tight against the sidewalk. So typically shies are introduced to just provide a little bit of breathing room for safety reasons. And Counselor, I just want to clarify, you said for new streets, so I moved to this slide. Is this the cross section you're looking at?
I'm looking at figure 10.
Yeah, I don't have the
Okay,
enumeration.
that's existing.
Yeah, so you were looking at existing. Okay, let me go back.
Okay, so even then on figure 12 for new streets. Okay, so we're 10, 7. So technically you're making the parking strip 8 feet wide. You got 7 foot and a foot there, so you're between the gutter and the actual travel lane, it would be 8 feet, right?
Yes, I mean, if people were parking in the gutter, then yes.
Well, does happen.
Oh, for sure.
So to accommodate maybe some more for the landscape strip, if the sidewalk, I mean, if you had a sidewalk that was 5 foot or 5'6", you're going to gain a little more, and then just to get a little bit more for that, if we're going to have planter strips with trees, I'm against them, but if that's where council is kind of going towards, I think you're going to need as much as possible, because the trees eventually are going to screw up the sidewalks and ruin any kind of utilities under the ground and mess up the pavement. I've got pictures of it. I've seen it. It's something that happens. And then that's a big cost back to the city in time. And then you also have the problem of people, not all people, but some people will not take care of those planting strips and they just turn into a big weed garden.
Yeah, so Councilor, I have a couple of responses. So one is, just to reiterate, the landscape strips in this section are optional. So it's not that the standard would require the strips in every instance. Two, I'm not a street tree expert by any means, but I'm aware that there's, a schedule of tree species that most communities keep that have recommendations for widths and species. To my knowledge, I don't know if there are many, if any, trees that would really be appropriate for a 2-foot strip. So I think this is intended more as, like I mentioned in one of the previous slides, like minor stormwater management benefit. But the intent here is not to plant trees for the reasons that you've mentioned. I think in a 2-foot strip, you'd run into problems pretty quickly. So this would be, decorative shrubs or grass or something to that nature. And again, it would be optional and dependent on the context. So it wouldn't be a requirement.
Are there any other questions?
Okay, so I guess I'm confused here. We're talking about new collector streets, correct? Am I
No,
right?
sir, we're talking about existing streets.
Existing collector streets. Okay, I had my page turned over, sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Yeah, there's a lot of sections. I get confused myself. I totally understand. But yeah, so like I mentioned, I think the trade-off between existing and new is, again, do we want to accept a cross-section standard that basically renders your entire collector street system substandard? I don't think we want to, so I think this is something that can be achieved within your existing budget and resources. It's not a major change to what's out there already, but it doesn't introduce the opportunity for some stormwater management benefits, in the form of those landscape strips, but doesn't require trees and it doesn't even require the space. It's just an option. Where we were a little bit more aggressive was with the collector new street standard, which is the following slide. So that one has, much more width, and we actually show like an actual tree there because we recognize that I think anything beyond 4 feet, tree species are available that are suitable to that width.
Eduardo, this is Commissioner Chavez again. So in order to do the proposed for the existing streets, we are gonna build into the street the landscape strip and the curb, because we cannot touch the properties. That's gonna be a lot of money to achieve that. My way of thinking is we just leave the existing streets alone. But they have sidewalks. I mean, we have all these new developments, brand new curves, brand new sidewalks, and that's gonna be a nightmare. And I don't understand why we are trying to modify those. I'm confused.
No, I'm sorry, go ahead, Commissioner.
No, I just think of the new developments. I mean, the way I see it, you cannot grow the sidewalk. I mean, it's confusing because the scale, you show the same width for the existing one, the 6 feet, and then in the proposed. So are we growing into the street to achieve the 9 feet instead of the 6 feet?
Yeah, Commissioner, that's another one of those weird ones. I mean, it really depends, right? Because it depends on where the right of way is in a given section. So in some cases, your street environment might be built right out to the end of right of way, in which case you're absolutely right. If you wanted to accommodate that landscape strip, you would be building into the asphalt, which, is a thing. In other cases, you might have space between the back of sidewalk and the adjacent property, in which case, building to this standard would be building out as opposed to filling in the middle, right? So it just depends on the context, but to your point, I understand, you know, this was an attempt at incorporating stormwater benefits into your existing street standard, but I think it's a fair point, right? I mean, if we're already being ambitious with our new streets, then maybe there's a case for leaving existing streets alone. So I think it's a fair point.
I would just leave it alone. I mean, that's my recommendation. It's going to be cost prohibited and it's going to be very, very disruptive.
Okay, Counselor?
I think there's been a little bit of confusion here. I think we're confusing existing streets with new collector streets. The curb bump outs where we're putting 7-foot bump outs into the street, those are not for existing streets. He's just proposing a 2-foot, where there's space available, a 2-foot buffer between sidewalk and curb. If that makes sense. And that was just for existing streets that are already built, and then only if we had cash available.
And only we have land available too, because like I said, the sidewalk is right at the property line, then you're gonna be pushing into the street, and that's gonna be very, very expensive.
Yeah.
I
Okay,
mean, we have no money to repair our roads, we have no money to repair sidewalks, you know, that, I would just leave them alone for now.
Mhm.
That's my recommendation.
okay, go ahead.
Well, Mayor, before moving on, maybe we could reach quorum on this. Would the other councilors and commissioners support maybe leaving the existing streets to the current standard, essentially? If that's direction that we can receive tonight, then that's you know, something that we can incorporate into the next draft.
Counselor?
I would prefer extending that 2 feet if it's possible.
Mhm.
Counselors down there?
Yeah, this is Counselor Thompson Riser. I think existing streets do have to be left alone. I can't imagine going through Carlton Crest with all that concrete now and drilling out holes. So I think it is for the new developers and that sort of guidance that this is useful.
Mhm.
I concur. We should leave the streets as they are at this point.
Yeah, I think it's, to everybody's point, I mean, I understand about adopting the new streets, but not to sound redundant, like, I mean, you're dealing with a lot more than just asphalt. You're dealing with storm drains, manholes, different things, infrastructure that's in that area that we're hoping to get 2 feet. But I also understand that we're not just talking about 7th Street or whatever other collector. We're also talking about some other streets that are not, you know, 20 years old that don't have anything in there, you know, so I see the point of, you know, I think this gives us the flexibility,
Providing.
you know, to provide that for when feasible versus we're gonna tear up 7th Street and Carlton Crest and put it to this standard. That doesn't make sense at all. But I do think it makes sense for a different collector that we're not really focused on at the moment that could potentially add that space.
Counselor Thompson Riser, did you have a comment? Okay.
So the,
Are you okay? Okay.
permission.
No.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, so we're all kind of, I'm hearing on the same page, leave existing
Mhm.
collectors how they are, and let's focus on designing new collectors that will benefit the city. Right or wrong? Am I?
Well, I think, sorry, I didn't.
Oh, go ahead.
I don't think that what they have proposed changes anything, because it does say that the 2-foot landscape strip is optional. But I think, so I don't think that, in my opinion, I think we all agree, we may be talking around each other, but on figure 10, I think we're okay with it. Because we're going to be able to look at different areas of town where, hey, we could add a landscape strip here. Great. Fantastic. So I don't think, I'm just challenging. I just want to make sure clarity on the wording, like leaving existing streets alone. I don't think captures what the whole group wants. I think the proposed works.
I agree with you, Council.
Do we want to say undeveloped streets? I mean, we had a development like a JR Meadows and Carlton Crest, but I mean, a lot of the old sections of town, we might be able to do this.
Mhm.
So I would say undeveloped.
Yeah, I chime in just to say a couple of things here for existing versus new, and want to make sure that we're utilizing consistent language that's in the development code. And so that's one of the things that we watch and make sure that if we have when somebody brings up, hey, a different term, it's a, wait a minute, we got definitions on here for consistency. The other thing too, just sometimes you have with a redevelopment of a property that might be pretty large, it might be partition and develop. There are street frontage improvements along an existing street. And so the code does call for that. And so there are cases where we look at, okay, it's an existing street following just this table here, and we look at it and we say, oh, is there sidewalks there? No, there are not. So we have code that enables the city to require a frontage improvement. It's kind of limited to the half-street frontage improvement, but it's pretty much, yeah, through evaluating the existing street in that context of a development proposal, does it meet these standards right here? For new streets, doesn't exist. It's a new extension of a street. Maybe that's stubbed right now. So I just wanted that distinction when you're looking at these standards. It might be through an existing street that it's a capital improvement, that the city has some money and is improving it in that context, or it might be a case where you have a redevelopment of a large property.
Thank you. Okay.
Mayor, just calling to attention that there is a hand in the chat. I'm not sure if you can see that.
Who is in the chat?
I think that's Michael Duncan from ODA.
Okay. Yes.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Hey, Michael.
Yes.
Hi there. And sorry for, maybe I was just kind of letting the process go here, but I did want to, if I may, just chime in on the existing future street cross sections here. And again, it's Michael Duncan, Oregon Department of Transportation. So I work within the TGM program, and I sit on the project management team for this project. So thanks everyone in the room there for making time to meet tonight. So, but I did want to kind of maybe echo a little bit of what Scott is saying. Hopefully I'm not echoing it wrong, but I do want to note that just because you have a street cross section that points to existing streets, it's really there to have in your TSB in your back pocket. So should development patterns shift in a way that you may expect it to in the next 20 years, you have that to point to future funding sources to build it to that cross section. So, and I guess where I'm going with this is, I don't know if this is a great example, but say 3rd Street, right? So that's an existing collector. Am I on point on that? Okay. So development happens down south, part of town, as it may be already happening. And you have a school there. And so say 5 years from now, there is a grant out there that helps, connect places in your community to schools and new residential development. And I'm not saying Safe Route School specifically, but there might be something out there. There's a lot of support out there for housing, and if you can get kids to walk or ride their bike to schools, it's always a great thing. So you want to be able to say, hey, we've got an existing street, an existing collector here, and we would love for it to be built to this standard. Let's apply for some grants to get that done. So that's why you would include it. Now that may not be a one size fits all. There may be other parts of community that you say, you know, like this will be substandard for the next 20 years, maybe 30 years. And who knows when we'll ever divert, you know, funding to improve that. But you don't want to, you don't necessarily want to, what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, right, exactly. And so I you know, as a counselor mentioned, and Scott too, I think it's kind of good to have that in your back pocket. It doesn't necessarily, you know, hold your feet to the fire to build every collector to that cross section, but should the opportunity arise, the city's prepared at a policy level to provide some direction there.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Okay. Okay, I think we can move along.
Great, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Michael, for chiming in there. I think you articulated some of what I was thinking about getting out next, so I think that's helpful context. I guess in direct response to one of the comments about, you know, basically going out with a drill and doing all of the collector streets, you know, that is certainly not the intent here. I think, to Michael's point, it's to provide that design flexibility and that forward thinking so that when things are right from a funding perspective, from a political perspective, you have a standard that is generally supported, that gets at some of the benefits that the city cares about. In this case, we're just trying to fit in a little bit more landscape strips for stormwater benefit purposes, and also from a safety perspective, you know, buffering between parking and sidewalks. But again, it's optional. It's not a requirement, and effectively your cross section would be the same. So maybe let's leave that one there for now, and let's get to the new streets. I think this one's a bit more exciting because it's substantially different. So here we have the existing right of way. So this is 71 feet is what your current code says, right? Which is, you know, we heard loud and clear, is a pretty big footprint, especially for a collector street, right? Currently your code dictates 46 feet of pavement width. So when I tried to make this kind of pan out in the illustration here, we ended up with these really wide travel lanes, which, you know, again, aren't specified. Parking is included, again, the width of which is not enumerated. But you did, there are requirements for 6 feet of sidewalk and 5 foot landscape strips, which are supportive of trees, like we've discussed. So in the proposed, we took what you said and we really looked at ways to neck this down in a way that is much more conducive to kind of a small town environment that Carlton is. So in this case, we looked at, you know, the reality of the volumes and the speeds that you see on a lot of the newer collector streets, which, even though they're collector by name, as you know, many of you have shared with me before, many of them work more like residential access streets, right? Like they're not really collectors in an urban or in a city sense. So based on some of the guidance that we've researched from the Department of Transportation, also other kind of industry research, it looks like 10-foot shared travel lanes are appropriate in this kind of a context. They still accommodate the kinds of traffic that you would expect in a new collector street, especially in the Carlton context, where most of these collector streets are being built to connect to residential areas. We've preserved that parking, given that it's important, especially in those access ways to residential areas. And then the rest of it is really kind of what you've seen in some of the other cross sections, where we've just tried to be more specific about you know, basically figuring out where that additional space is coming from. So again, typically you need some kind of shy distance to provide a little bit of a buffer between right-of-way elements. We've held a foot on both sides of the street. In practice, it could be more, it could be less, but a foot is kind of safe. Similarly for curb and gutter, your curb and gutter is generally going to fall somewhere within that foot mark. But again, that would be subject to the specific public works standards that you have in your community. So again, this is kind of a safe, relatively conservative example of what this cross-section might lay out like. But the big benefit here is that we've managed to cut out a substantial amount of right-of-way. So the new standard for new collector streets would actually be 60 feet now, as opposed to 71 feet. And that would achieve everything that you're seeing. So you would still have shared travel lanes, no bike lanes, which we heard from you were not necessary in these areas. keeping that on-street parking and then preserving those landscape strips for trees. And I'm realizing there's a typo in the on the screen here. This is optional 2-foot landscape strips. That's not accurate. The minimum that we've identified here is 5 feet. And that should be reflected in your packet. So again, this is a pretty big change, right? I mean, this is a substantially smaller right-of-way footprint, but hopefully it's closer to what you envisioned based on our conversation from last time. So I'll open it back up to discussion and input.
Trying to make sure I'm not. Yes. Commissioner.
Commissioner Madrid, I just want to say nice job. I think it incorporates everything we previously discussed. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Yes.
So I want to be clear with your intermittent parking. So I think what I saw was a minimum of 2 parking spaces per parking bay. Is that correct?
Honestly, Counselor, I don't remember if I wrote down 2 or 3. I know that was the range that we discussed, so I'm guessing it was 2. But I'd have to.
I think you wrote a minimum of 2.
Okay.
So in a typical city block, you would see 1 mid-block choker and then would the intersections be bulbed out also? Or are you thinking just 1 mid-block choker and a standard intersection?
Yeah, that's another one that it's a great question. These are cross sections, so they're really kind of intended to get at that mid-block environment for the most part. Intersection standards can be quite different. In some communities, they don't allow any bulb outs except at the intersections. So I can't really comment on what this holds for intersections. But the idea here is that there would be an allowance, I think is the word that we used, in a typical cross section for an intermittent parking lane. The frequency of those bulb outs, I think would be up to the city. And, certainly there can be a healthy debate about the number of minimum parking spaces that we would want to preserve. Maybe it's not 2, maybe it's 4.
Right.
Yeah, and actually, thanks for bringing that up. I should have mentioned I did bring an image for this one as well. So here's an example in a more kind of residential environment. Just want to clarify, this is not the exact design that we're proposing, but it's just an example of something that I've seen done where they used relatively low cost materials. So they didn't build like an entire raised surface. It's basically just this curb that goes out into the right of way, and then they've planted a couple of trees there, which I think looks really nice, and again would be maybe a cost-effective treatment in a more residential collector street environment. So that's an example of what it could look like in a typical mid-block location, but we didn't get to the level of detail of specifying what the treatment would be at intersections versus mid-blocks.
So can I clarify that? So if we specify a minimum of 2 car per parking spot, then the developer, I guarantee you, will do the whole block without, because that's just a minimum. And they'll do whatever's cheapest, and this will be more expensive for the developer to make those chokers. And so I think we need to somehow specify that there's a mid-block choker and then talk about intersections. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor.
Are there any other comments? Yes.
Eduardo, Commissioner Chavez, I am a little confused with your cross section. The curve is showed like a part of the sidewalk, the elevation of it. The curve is actually flush with the existing, with the asphalt. Am I saying something incorrect here?
No, but we also didn't get into specifications around grading. So, I think there could be a design where the intermittent bulb out is at grade or at the surface level. We didn't get into details about that. Again, because these are sort of planning level. So, grading is typically something that is a public works standard or more advanced design.
Okay, and the only other thing I have about those intermittent parking, I mean, a lot of people, they own RVs, trailers, and for boats or just travel trailers, it's gonna be a nightmare for them to park the RVs with all those intermittent parkings. I mean, I know, I'm not saying I'm against to it, but it is gonna be very difficult for people to park their RVs on the street. I mean, only temporarily or for a long term. That's my 10 cents or 2 cents.
Thank you, Commissioner. I actually lost reception for a few minutes there, but I think I caught the majority of it. So I think what you were saying is just, you know, you have concerns about the trade-offs regarding on-street parking, RVs, et cetera. Is that the gist of your comment?
Yeah, if we are only allowing two spaces, it's gonna be hard for some people to park their rigs, you know, even
Yeah.
if we are not allowed to keep them on the street, but just to load them or offload them, it's gonna be hard. I mean, some of those RVs are 30 feet long. So
Mhm.
they're gonna park to load them to go camping. It's gonna be a nightmare for them to park.
Okay, Counselor.
Yeah, I guess I question too, you know, just because I know I'm not putting you on the spot, your picture, great illustration. But it also doesn't really match what we're proposing, because, you know, we're adding a 5-foot landscape strip, which I think is great. And
Mhm.
then now we're adding a bulb out to a 5-foot landscape strip.
Mhm. Right.
Seems kind of like a lot. Like, I mean, I think the 5-foot landscape strip is great, and I like the idea of intermediate parking, but I just question what that actually looks like. You know, now you're looking at 8 feet or whatever that looks like. Maybe it looks great. The illustration is showing it right next to the sidewalk, not with a 5-foot landscape strip next to it.
Right, Counselor. Yeah, no, I think that's a fair point, and yeah, you know, maybe we need to go back to the drawing board and maybe draw like a cross-section view of what that might look like. I don't think the intent was, you know, like a 13-foot buffer, but I could see how that might be construed that way based on how this is illustrated. You know, again, I think what we were trying to get at here is a couple of things. I mean, one is certainly providing 5+ feet for trees, right? Specifically, making sure that there's a healthy amount there. And again, recognizing that this is the opportunity to leverage developer investment to get those trees. The other is that, you know, given that this is a shared lane environment, again, recognizing that a lot of the bike routes that we've proposed in the TSP would effectively go through these kinds of environments. You do get some traffic calming and safety benefits of having those bulb outs beyond just the stormwater and tree benefits. So, you know, basically having that area extend out into the parking and play a little bit of a trade-off is sort of the idea there. But I totally recognize what the other commissioner was bringing up regarding, you know, whether or not it's too much effectively and what the trade-offs really are, especially if there's a need for RVs or larger vehicles. So yeah, I mean, I think it's up for healthy debate. I mean, perhaps the direction from this body today is that the 5-foot landscape strip is adequate, given that once again, it's a minimum. So if there are opportunities to do like an 8-foot strip and the money is there and it makes sense with the particular conditions in that site, then we can do more, but we're at a minimum, we're getting 5 feet so that we can do a tree, right? Perhaps a different direction that we get from you is that you like the intermittent parking, but maybe we just need to refine it a little bit more and give you more details about how that would work. So, yeah, I guess I'm curious to hear what others think.
Counselor Erickson.
So with this picture, you've got this bulb out, 2 trees. Did you do, just curious, any of the math? Okay, if you have 100-foot, if each lot is 100-foot wide, 10-foot driveway, and then we have a set distance in town of what trees are to be planted at, where, I mean, how wide can these be to accommodate that tree spacing and then accommodate your 2-car parking area? and still have, you know, room for the driveways and everything down the street.
Yeah, Counselor, that's a good point, actually, because you do have local driveway spacing standards, I believe. And I think those are specific to, you know, different residential areas. So no, we didn't do the math to figure out how that would work out. But it's tricky because again, I don't think we're trying to prescribe the number of bulb outs, you know, like I think that's far beyond what we can really get at in a cross section. I think the idea here is just once again introducing the opportunity for that kind of a treatment, but how that would lay out in an actual street environment is anybody's best guess. I think you'd actually have to go out there and, you know, measure, look at where the driveways are, compare that against the standards and make sure that everything was up to code. So we can do some research on that and see if there's any easy answers from your driveway spacing standards that we can bring back to you in the TSP, but we haven't done that work to date.
Thank you.
Thank you. Move ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Give me just 1 second. I'm gonna jot that down just to make sure I don't miss that. Okay. All right, we're making good progress, folks. So moving on. So this one is for the school zone collectors. So really the main difference here is, once again, we've tried to clarify where the buffer, shy, curb and gutter are coming from. This is one where we could, once again, consider requiring striping for the on-street bicycle facilities. We haven't changed the width for those, so both in existing and proposed, we have 5 feet. Similarly, the right-of-way, the overall footprint for the cross-section hasn't changed. Sidewalks are the same. But we have introduced a slightly wider curb and gutter, given that this is an area where ostensibly you'll have, you know, children and families walking to and biking to and from school. But besides that, it's effectively the same. I think the main difference is that, you know, we've introduced those elements for buffer and shy, and trying to be clear about the minimum width for travel lanes. So yeah, I guess I'll kick it back over to you all for any comments on this one.
Hello? Commissioner?
Commissioner Madrid, my question on figures 13 and 14, the collector for the school zone, and you had previously mentioned 3rd Street, which is our main school collector. This does not have any landscaping, trees, planting strips whatsoever. And so is that a conflict into what we previously discussed for 3rd Street?
Good question. So I don't know if it's a conflict. I mean, I think it's again, it's a fair discussion. I mean, I think here what we tried to do is not make your right-of-way footprints unnecessarily wide. So, you know, we tried to keep the right-of-ways as consistent as possible. So your current standard is 49 feet. We tried to keep it around there, and without substantially taking away from the bikeway minimums or the sidewalk minimums, there really just wasn't enough space to add landscape strips. With that said, again, I think there can be some healthy discussion around that. I mean, would the city be comfortable with, you know, perhaps a 60-foot right-of-way standard that incorporates those trees? It can certainly be done, but again, that just introduces, you know, more investment down the line. I think the benefit to that, though, is that given that these are for school zones, there is, like Michael mentioned, there are grant programs out there. Safe Routes to Schools is probably the most famous, but there's opportunities out there to get these kinds of improvements funded through external dollars. So, you know, I think it's something that we can talk about. But to answer your question succinctly, yeah, we tried to keep the right of way as consistent as possible to not kind of blow up your expectations for this type of improvement.
Thank you.
I
Oh,
addressed
sorry.
Eddie
Yes,
on one
go
of the
ahead,
things,
sir.
just as we're talking about the school zone collector. And Eddie, I'm looking at the draft future streets map, roadway classifications. So this is what would be page 34 of the council's packet. And I do see future school zone collector. It's kind of different than what we've been talking about under the table here of existing school zone. That note, footnote 3 seems to state that the boundaries of that being the existing streets, but we do have Third Street going further south in the future there. And what would that be envisioned as the same standards as for more like clarification, and kind of like we have the distinction between existing and new street improvements for collector? I'm just kind of wondering, do we add another row there that says existing school zone versus new school, or continuation of the school zone, that's not existing? Do you follow what I'm saying?
I do. Yeah, I think that's a great point, Scott. And I think it actually gets to the other commissioners, Commissioner Madrid's previous question. So when this was drafted, the intent was that both existing and future school zone collectors would be developed to the same standard. And that gets to my answer about keeping the right of ways consistent, right? But to your point, maybe there's an opportunity to introduce a new school zone collector reflective of what's shown in that future streets map that does have more generous allowances for street trees. I think it's a good idea. I don't know if you were insinuating that or implying that, but it's a good idea. But to answer your question, yeah, I think the way that it's drafted currently assumes that existing and future would be held to this exact standard.
And that's the way that the note that note number 3 pretty much spells it out, that it's confined to that area of existing. So that would be the feedback that I'd ask for council and planning commission is, do we want to look at a new school zone and a row to be added below the table there for school zone existing versus new, or what would be future school zone as shown on the future map?
Counselor?
Me?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Thanks, Scott, because I was going right to that point. So I would like to see that and see an additional landscape for future street collector or school safety zone, whatever. You get to the point. It's almost 9 o'clock. But I also would like to say that if there's any area in town that I would like to see striping for bike lanes, it would be on a school zone collector.
Yes.
Yeah, again, oh, I'm sorry.
Ditto both Scott and Commissioner Skipper. And just having lived on Park Street for 15 years, the street, it's not identified. I believe it's Polk Street that comes off of Highway 47 over to the elementary school. It's very narrow. There are little to no street lights. There's certainly no bike paths. It's got very crunchy, I think what Commissioner referred to as fog lines, very crunchy edges to the pavement. Sidewalks are intermittent, and basically in some spaces, I wouldn't really call them parking spaces. It's in people's front yards. And so I think that feeder over to the grade school is in great need of improvement. And I do like I believe it's 13 and 14. I'm flipping on my iPad, sorry. Yeah, figure 13 and 14. I do like 14, and at the 49-foot maximum right away would be a huge improvement over what we currently have. And then leaving the larger, wider with planting strips and street trees for the north-south 3rd Street and proposed extension of 3rd Street, I think would make the most sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. That's great feedback. I think I got all that.
Okay. Counselor Erickson, did you? Okay, move along.
Move on. Okay, folks, again, just to quickly reiterate, so I think I'm hearing loud and clear, new school zone collector standard with room for trees. And otherwise, just separating out the distinctions between existing school zone collectors and future. And it sounds like based on Counselor Thomas Reiser's comment, even this 49-foot standard would be a major improvement on some of those existing feeders like Polk Street. So I think it's a great recommendation. And Scott, thanks again for bringing that up. I think that's a good way to move forward. All right, folks. So last but not least, we have our local streets. So the recommendations that we heard from you: develop low impact street standards to address parts of the city that are essentially built out, or where the local context does not call for improvement to the full residential street standard. So in response, we've drafted a new street standard that we're calling the residential rural street. It's very narrow, but I think it achieves some of the goals that we heard about last time. We also have maintained the local narrow option that you already have in your code, but we've updated that slightly in congruence with some of the previous ones that we've shared. And then once again, the issue around landscape strips for trees. So for this one, like you can see in your table and in your packet, we didn't make 5-foot landscape strips required for all local streets. We basically left that the same. And the main reason being, once again, that especially when you get into your local street system, it seems like maintenance can be a significant challenge. So, we'd love to hear your feedback on that and whether or not any of these optional landscape strips ought to be required on your local street system. So let's get through it. So starting with the local residential street standard. So these are just your standard residential streets. So your existing standard has 5-foot sidewalk, a 5-foot optional landscape strip, parking and travel lanes with a 34-foot total pavement width. One of the issues that we ran into when looking at this is when doing the math, the current right-of-way can't actually accommodate that 5-foot strip. Like there's literally not enough room in that standard. So we basically redrew it and enumerated the optimal or the minimum travel lane widths that you would expect in a residential context, and also the parking lane requirements. So for that, we necked all the way down to 10-foot for travel lanes, 7-foot parking lanes, and a couple of feet on both sides for shy, curb, and gutter. The sidewalks are retained at 5 feet, but it really does bring into jeopardy those landscape strips. I guess before turning it back over to you all, I'll just reiterate, like we have for the other ones, that these are minimums, right? So there are opportunities potentially to introduce more landscape strips, but that would require a greater maximum right of way. And what I heard last time was we don't want to make these roads too wide, especially in the local context. So I think that's certainly up for debate. So I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay.
So these local streets, these local residential streets, especially the new streets, I have very strong feelings about this. Our parking spaces, especially thinking of local streets as connectors that are they're not for people to dash through to get to a busier street. We don't want them to be that. We want them to be livable streets where kids do hopscotch on the sidewalks and can run across the street to their neighbors. To that end, I believe that we should have landscape strips. The city of Faircrest, Washington, which is slightly bigger than us, I think maybe it's like 7,000 people. I don't know. I can't remember now. Anyway, they had a great local street standard. They had really wide planting strips that wouldn't fit within our 50-foot right of way, but we could do 5-foot sidewalks, 2 6.5-foot planting strips, a planting strip on each side, 7-foot parking on one side only, which would get rid of the redundant parking that we don't need for residential places. Understanding that the EPA recommends that we do 2 to 2.5 parking spaces per resident. One side, the EPA says absolutely one side parking in a residential zone is plenty, and then 2 10-foot travel lanes. That makes a street that's livable and that actually feels like a place where people want to walk and interact at the street level. And when you have big wide lanes and no trees, street trees, it makes for an unpleasant neighborhood. And it's not the purpose of a residential street. I could name 12 cities just off the top of my head. None of them have local streets with less than a 4-foot planting strip on both sides for local residential street standards.
Counselor Chavez, or Commissioner Chavez, did you have a comment?
You know, I live in Newburgh for 21 years. And our sidewalks, I mean, it was a fairly new, built in 2004 development. And our sidewalks were 4 feet wide. And we had a planting strip for trees, 3 feet, and that was enough for big trees. What I noticed, the lanes, they were really narrow. So when you couldn't get two cars to pass each other. And they did that intentionally to be able to provide all the different widths and also to slow traffic. And I don't know, here we have 10-foot wide drive lanes, we have 2. So I don't know, can be a compromise to make the sidewalk 4 feet. I don't know, that's a requirement of 5 feet, I don't remember, but I worked in construction many years and our sidewalk were 4 feet. Put a 3-foot wide strip for trees and landscaping. Leave the parking on both sides because the first love of American people are homes, houses. The second love are cars. And I live in that neighborhood and everybody had a lot of cars, so we needed to park on both sides. And I don't know, we can sacrifice the 20 feet width of the lanes to something smaller to accommodate, like I said, 4 feet sidewalk, 3 feet planting strip, keep the parking, the 7 feet on each side, and try to sacrifice the drive lanes. Is that something feasible?
Anybody else? Counselor Erickson, you got any comments? Counselor.
I think Commissioner Madrid can go first. I'll go first real quick. I guess my question and confusion a little bit is, why the shift from the existing local residential? Maybe you could speak to that. Like it essentially, it gives you everything we had. I'm not sure what I'm missing here. Sorry. I'm not following because it gives you 34 feet of pavement width, which with 2 10-foot lanes gives you 7-foot parking on each side, but also the 5-foot landscape strip and a 5-foot sidewalk. Is that the 50-foot right of way that doesn't add up?
Yeah,
So
give me,
that's a misprint, I think. I just did the math. Yeah. So that's why. Never mind.
yeah, I was doing the math too. I was like, oh my gosh, did I mess this up? So Counselor, again, this is making some general assumptions because again, your parking lanes and your travel lanes aren't specified. So, maybe your parking lane's only 5 feet, right? But what we tried to do is, again, looking at what is a realistic parking lane minimum, based on all of the literature that's out there. And again, this is your local standard, right? So, as a municipality, you have the option to make it essentially whatever you want. But we try to be realistic, and yeah, if you add that up, at least the way it's currently laid out, I think I got like 54 feet or something like that. So there's just not enough room to accommodate that today. So, I think Counselor Terrell got straight to the heart of the issue. I mentioned, there's really only 2 ways you can go. I mean, one is a wider footprint, or the other is you start making trade-offs for right-of-way elements. And, parking is, can be pretty precious in a residential environment. But there's also a lot of upside to, making trade-offs with parking, as far as making it more livable and safer for kids and families and all that. And those are the kinds of questions that, as a consultant, I really can't prescribe, to a community. I think you guys really need to tell us what's most important, and then we can help you guys figure out what the best kind of blend of benefits is. So I guess a couple of options that I'll introduce. I mean, one is even more in the middle of the road, so to speak, is, you know, looking at parking, intermittent parking on one side of the street. So kind of similar to that intermittent parking lane idea that we talked about with the arterials and the collectors. I think especially in a local street environment that can work. And it can introduce some of that space for trees. I think the other is the commissioner's idea about narrowing either the parking lanes or the drive lanes or both, right? I mean, I think these are, again, generally recommended minimums, but you can accept less. And you know, that's something that we could look into. For example, you know, in Portland, for example, there's plenty of streets where you essentially need to pull over to let other people pass. It can be annoying, but you know, I have two small kids, and for me, I actually really prefer that in a residential environment because I don't feel like my kids are going to get run over, you know? So, I mean, that's it's an option, but again, it's different in every community, and there's certainly trade-offs. That's not to downplay the importance of parking, or people's loves for cars. You know, I think it's all contingent upon what's most important to you all as a community. But I do see multiple kind of ways out of this. So I guess, you know, the best thing is to hear more from you all about what's important, and then we can draft up a couple of options.
Commissioner Madrid, you had a comment?
Yes, I've lived on Grant Street and Park Street in Carlton for the times when my children were small. And when I look at the difference between figure 15 and figure 20, even though 20 is called a narrow option, the maximum right of way is only 1 foot difference. And to your point, I don't have a problem with parking on one side. I mean, when you're going down the street, that's one side that kids can dart out of. The other side is travel lanes, and you're going to see them. You're not sacrificing anything in terms of landscape or sidewalk width, and you're keeping your shy, which will allow people, like you say, to scoot over and somebody passes you. So with a 1 foot difference between maximum right of way and all of the benefits that we've been talking about for all of these other street types, I don't know if you want to speak to that. And I'm looking at figure 20 versus figure 15. 15 and 16, I understand that 15 is the existing. And if you have to in your local residential street have parking on both sides, I guess I would prefer the existing. But with 1 foot difference in right of way, and you've got wiggle room, pardon the pun, on figure 20 with shy, I really like, I mean, if I was living on the street, I really like figure 20. Personal preference.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. I think you you highlighted an astute point, which is, yeah, I mean, when you look at the total maximum right of way between the previous section we were looking at and this local option, it's effectively the same, but the configuration is different. The difference here being that, you know, we've traded off some parking to really secure that space for landscape strips, and ultimately, I think, create a more sort of, you know, safe residential environment. So that's not to suggest that we automatically go ahead and collapse these, but it's an option, right? I think we can come up with a blended solution here. So yeah, I'll kick it back over to you all again. I mean, it's hard for me to make an opinion on this because it's so different in every community, and it's ultimately about the values that you have as a commission and as a council.
Are there any other comments?
So I go back to figure number 20, and you have parking on one side and 2 drive lanes. Like I said, in America, we love cars, okay? And family, they have kids and they start to drive. And I mean, I live in that neighborhood in Newberg, and I mean, we couldn't find enough parking space. I don't know much of the code, you know, for streets, but we do figure 20 propose with parking on both sides and make it a one-way street.
Yeah, Commissioner, I think it's a good idea. frankly have not seen one-way streets work in a residential context. Like typically you need some kind of a circulator environment. So I've seen it work in downtowns or business districts. I think the other thing that we would be running up against here that is a direct limitation is emergency access, right? So I want to say the minimum unobstructed width for emergency vehicles is, I think like 22 feet. And that can include, and that can't include the parking space. So it has to be like free and clear, no parking anywhere. So I hear what you're saying. There's a version of this basically where maybe we keep the parking lanes, but we make it, you know, like a 10-foot travel lane where people need to wait and see. But I'm not sure if that would pass from an emergency response perspective. So that's just another thing to consider here.
Thank you.
Counselor?
Maybe this is a question for Scott, but jumping to figure 20 and then back to figure 15. What dictates that? You know, what's stopping a developer from saying, I've got this option for a narrow option. This whole development's going to be like figure 20 versus figure 15. They're both local, residential. One's a narrow option. Is that typical to have a narrow option versus just a standard local residential?
Eddie, do you want me to answer?
Maybe
Or-
I'll kick it off, Scott, with
Okay.
sort of a non-answer. So counselors and commissioners, in your packet, you have the full memo. There should be a footnote associated with the local narrow option. And that footnote has information about some of the criteria and thresholds that would allow the city to go with a local narrow option as opposed to a standard option. What those requirements are, I don't have off the top of my head, so maybe Scott can speak to those, but that information is, it is in your packet.
Thanks.
Sure.
I can speak to it. Yeah, it is in the packet. So the local narrow option, there's a footnote number 2. And so on page 36 of the council's packet is the notes there. And this says local narrow option may be requested in residential areas only that provide access to 19 feet or 19 feet, excuse me, I'm getting tired, 19 or fewer dwelling units. So that's kind of the threshold there is 19 or fewer dwelling units. This option must maintain minimum obstruction width of 20 feet for fire access emergency. It's a good question. So somebody says, I have 19 dwelling units or fewer. Do I qualify? And so I'd have to say yes, applying clear and objective standards. Yes, would be the answer. And so if the council has concerns about that, now is the time to express that concern. That narrow, I'm just looking at the code here too, just to make sure that we've got it all right. But that narrow option does exist, and there is that footnote number 2 that is there as well. And yeah, now is the time to express any concerns with that, because there would probably be a proposal for that section.
Council President.
Yeah, so for the sake of knowing that we're going to see this again and get community input, in my opinion, I'm okay with the narrow option as it explained in the footnote. Thank you. But I also feel like reverting back to figure 15 answers everybody's concerns. We get more landscape strip for trees, for all that. We have the parking on both sides, as Commissioner Chavez mentioned, because I know that there's a lot of people that agree with what he's saying, and also agree with what Councilor Terrell is saying too. The trees, we heard it tonight. So to me, I don't like figure 16 because I don't think it answers anybody's concerns. I feel like figure 15 does. And then you also have that figure 20 for narrow options.
Counselor, just to interject, so would the recommendation then from you be to expand the right-of-way minimum to accommodate those 5 feet of landscape strips shown in the existing?
Yes, to 64.
Right, yes.
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, because of all the concerns that are mentioned, emergency access, parking, all the things that we're talking about and discussing. I don't think that there's a way to shrink that down to 50 or 49 feet for all residential local streets. You're not going to make everybody happy.
Counselor Terrell?
So I'm fine with expanding the right of way width. I would request that we take optional out of the landscape strip recommendation. I think I would prefer just parking on one side because I think you'll have a more livable neighborhood with larger planting strips, given that it's a place where people actually live. And, public streets compose more than 80% of public space in its city. And I mean, I think it's kind of startling to think that's where you meet your neighbors, that's where you live. And people who are living on a street, the street is not just for drivers. And I think it's really important to remember that streets are for everybody who is using them. They're for little kids, they're for cyclists, they're for people in wheelchairs. And local streets are residential streets that are meant to go slow. They're meant to have a slow roll on a residential street. And the best way to do that is to make it livable, where people actually want to be on the street. Thank you.
Counselor Erickson?
So with that being said, I mean, the street I live on is your front yard, a sidewalk, parking, 2 narrow lanes of traffic, parking, sidewalk, the front yard. People in that neighborhood, they park in their driveways. They also park on both sides of the street. I'm out in my front yard, as some of you know, continuous project. And I see people, it doesn't matter if it's in the morning or 7, 8 o'clock at night. That neighborhood is full of people walking, continuously walking, people with dogs, kids. I've got 5 or 6 little kids now as neighbors running around, bicycling, doing whatever they do. The narrow lanes going down First Street make you slow down because if you have parking both sides to pass, yes, one person has to pull over and stop. The other person goes through and then they continue on. It's a narrower street. If you take away parking on one side, people in town aren't, that's going to be a hindrance for people coming to town when they start seeing those type of things. They have a RV they want to load, unload. They have nowhere to do it. It's not like they're parking on the street all the time with them, but they still want to do those type of things. So one-sided parking, that's more like a private street in my mind. So we can narrow the travel lanes, but I think parking on both sides is needed. And in some of these smaller smaller side streets, you can get rid of the landscaping, and the landscaping can be in the people's front yard. Trees, bushes, those kind of things.
Counselors, I was just going to maybe introduce an idea here. So I think what I'm hearing is some fidelity between your comments. So I mean, it sounds like there's probably enough support in the room for expanding the residential standard to 64 feet to include a required planting strip. However, Councilor Terrell, I hear what you're saying loud and clear as well, and I'm wondering if the key to this is looking back at that footnote about what the requirements are, or excuse me, what the thresholds are for the local street option. So right now it's 19 dwelling units, maybe another threshold would be the right of way, right? So if there isn't adequate right of way, in other words, if you don't have 64 feet of right of way, and there's a development happening in a local environment, maybe that is the trigger for the local street option. So I don't know if that's making sense, but basically amending that footnote to say the local street option is viable if you meet that dwelling requirement, or if you don't have enough right of way to make those required landscape strips part of your cross section. Is that making sense? I mean, I'm also getting tired, so I apologize.
Yeah, we're all getting.
That's the need to, yeah, you're gonna get some clarification. Eddie, are you talking about the local narrow option there? Because I was confused, and Commissioner Fernandez Madrid is also wondering about that.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. And I apologize. Yeah, so the footnote by the local narrow option, and there was a question about, you know, when does the city get to do that, or when does a developer get to do that? It's based on that threshold around 19 dwelling units. And currently that's the only threshold, right? I'm hearing you know, you guys trying to work together to find a way to, you know, meet in the middle. So what I'm hearing is maybe we stick with the 64-foot standard for the section on the screen. We require landscape strips, and then we also make it easier for the city to allow for that local street option to happen. And the way that you would do that would be to amend that footnote to also make it based on right of way. So if you have a development going in and there isn't that 64 feet that you need in order to maintain those spaces for trees, then you get to do the local narrow option.
Eddie, on the screen right now, we have the local residential option, not the narrow option.
Yeah, that's right.
So I think you're
Maybe that's why it's confusing. No. I'm probably just speaking to the wrong slide. Maybe this is easier. So yeah, what I'm trying to say is, if we make it so that if you don't have 64 feet of right of way, you have to do this. Maybe that will encourage more of this kind of development pattern in right of way constrained environments. But then we also require trees in the other section that we were just sharing. Maybe that's the middle ground here. And I still don't know if I'm making sense. Let me know.
Go ahead.
Well, Eddie, I'm just going to mention quickly, I'm sorry that I just don't see that scenario. You could put it in there, but I think it's not going to be, there won't be right of way, at least for new development, there won't be right of way. It would be following the pattern of the future streets plan, and it would not exist. So I'm not really sure how that would work, but anyways, just some food for thought there. I see what you're trying to do is maybe move the threshold away from the number of units and focus on the land itself and whether there's an existing right of way that's there. I don't really see that, but anyways, that's my thoughts.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just, how would we determine how much right of way was available if it's just a blank piece of property that's going to be developed? So how do you know? That's my question.
No, fair question. I think typically, as part of the project development process, you have to go out and do survey, and then, or you know, there might be existing information at the city, tax parcel information, and so on that would, where you'd be able to determine the exact amount of right of way that's available. I just wanted to go back and respond to comments to Scott's comment, which you're absolutely right, Scott. If we're talking about entirely new streets, then you're right. I mean, there's probably going to be enough right of way to do the full standard, so to speak. I guess when I suggested that, I was thinking about existing residential streets that might be retrofitted, but I don't know how much of that is really happening in Carlton. So you're right. It might be a moot point.
Okay. Are we done?
Yeah, I think we've left Eddie with a lot of options. Good luck, Eddie. We like
Yeah.
it, we don't like it, we don't know what to do.
Yeah, that's all right. And again, folks, you'll have, you know, several more bites of the apple, but at least to walk away with something constructive here. I mean, I think what I'm hearing is, regardless of how this shakes out, it sounds like the landscape strip in the residential street standard needs to be required. I'm hearing that loud and clear from Councilor Sorrell. I'm not hearing any major objection to that. I think it's a fair recommendation if we care about making residential streets more livable, shadier, cooler, better stormwater management, et cetera. So I think that's a change we can make right off the bat, right? I'm also hearing that there's support for the local street. I keep saying local street. There's support for the local narrow street option, right? As an option. I think maybe where there's some work for us to do is to figure out how we leverage that option so that there's flexibility in how the city addresses new development and then also retrofits to existing residential streets. So maybe that's the question that we still need to work out, but I'm still walking away from this conversation with some clear guidance on how we can improve that residential street standard. So if that sounds good, maybe we can move on. If that sounds totally wrong, you can let me know.
We have one more question.
I'm
Sure.
almost done, I promise. I
That's
would
fine.
like to see, I know I was talking about the existing number 15, but number 18 we haven't talked about it, commercial, industrial. but
Right.
That's also smaller than 64. It's 60 foot with more, distinct lanes. So that could be something that merges with figure 15. So we don't, just something to point out.
Yeah. Let me jot that down. It's a good point.
And Counselor Erickson's got a question.
Yeah, this Counselor Erickson, and for the record, no, I'm not strongly for all these street trees, parking or planter strips. Some of the neighborhoods don't need them to keep the streets narrow, and they're still livable. So some of them you need to delete. That's my take on it.
Thank you, Counselor.
Commissioner Madrid.
And just finally to look at the verbiage on footnote number 2 about the local narrow option. I'm not sure where the 19 dwelling unit number came from. Maybe Scott has some history on that, but it does address the minimum unobstructed view for fire and emergency vehicles. So I'm happy about that. And maybe most importantly, as the very last thing, it says may only be used with approval of the city. So I don't see it being abused because each and every development would have to make that case. And then I know that you were listening, but I don't know if you had video at the beginning of our meeting here. We had 8 separate citizens come in and speak very strongly about their preference for trees. So I just want to make sure that you're aware that that was on the record at the beginning of the meeting. These folks all came on their own time and spoke to how important that was ecologically, climate, and also livability, and gave some very poignant testimony about children and grandchildren and how much that adds. So just wanted to make sure that everybody's aware that in that footnote, it says may only be used with approval of the city. And I would strongly urge keeping that verbiage intact. Thank you.
Okay. Moving on.
All right. So I think we have 2 more sections to look at, if you can believe it. This one I think is hopefully relatively straightforward. No major changes on this one. So this is your residential streets that are in commercial or industrial areas. So your existing standard provides a range of width for sidewalks, so it's 5 to 10 feet, with the caveat that commercially zoned properties do require 10 feet. There's a 5-foot optional landscape strip. There are parking lanes on both sides of the street and travel lanes. So like we have in the past, we've gone through and updated the standard to reflect the minimum widths that we recommend. Given that this is in a commercial and industrial area, and we're more likely to see, freight vehicles, commercial vehicles, et cetera, moving through these kinds of environments, we did increase the drive lane minimum width to 11 feet as opposed to 10, like we did in the other residential environments. And then otherwise, it should look fairly familiar. So the parking lanes are 7 feet as kind of a general minimum. We've incorporated shy curb and gutter. We've kept the 5-foot landscape strips as optional, although this all does fit within the maximum right of way, so we could make them required. And we've also kept that 5 to 10 foot sidewalk requirement, given that 10 feet will be expected along commercially zoned properties. So again, we were able to sort of achieve or accomplish all of this within the existing right of way of 60 feet. But you know, hopefully this provides more direction for the city to consider in terms of like what actually goes in the cross section, what the ideal minimums might be, and then how to potentially treat landscaping in these kinds of environments. So I think the big questions here are, you know, the landscape strips, like we have been talking about. Like, should these be required? If yes, you know, what are the implications for the sidewalk minimums and the overall right of way? And then otherwise, you know, just making sure that we got the drive lane and parking lane minimums right, and making sure that that feels appropriate for these kinds of areas. So without further ado, I'll kick it back over to the councilors and commission for discussion.
Okay, just trying to make sure who all's here. Okay, Susan, go ahead.
I'm fine with the section, with the one small change of making landscape strips required
Yep.
rather than optional.
Counselor Madrid.
I would second
you.
Counselor Terrell's comments with the additional comment of my own being that if you have what our citizens are asking for, which is more trees in a commercial area, not optional, I think it follows that anybody with a commercial property is going to take very good care of their frontage on that street frontage. It's not going to be a weed bed. They're not going to be unwatered. They may add flower baskets or what have you. But I would like to strip the optional verbiage. Thanks.
Thank you.
This Commissioner Chavez, and I saw people coming today in support of trees. And don't take me wrong, I love trees. I have planted probably in the 4 years 40 of trees on my property. But we have more people in this community, and I don't know if we can run a poll in our community and just select a few houses from each neighborhood and see what they really want. You know, I don't know if we have time for it, but what's more important for people, to have a tree or to have a place to park? And like I said, I've seen the parking being an issue many, many times. And we just need to be what's going to work best for our community. And I don't know, we can just write a few questions. They'll hand deliver those polls to houses. We select a few houses in the neighborhood and go from there. What's more important for people in this town? You know, let's hear from them. I know that only people that support trees showed up today, but there's a lot of people that maybe they want parking instead of trees, you know? So can we run, I don't know, with the city or I don't know how to do it. I can do it myself. I can print and say, what do you want, trees or parking? You know? And like I said, I don't oppose trees. I love trees. So, but we just need to hear what this town wants. Thank you.
Yes.
There isn't enough right of way to spend the landscape strip required.
You're making a statement.
That statement.
Okay.
For commercial.
Yeah.
Okay.
Counselor Erickson.
And I guess I wonder, Jose, as you're commenting, I hear that, you know, they say that all these people that want these trees, but I never see them here in at city council meetings. I see the same few people that live outside the city limits here talking. Tonight, there was two people that actually lived in town, but since the first of the year, it's been the people from outside the city limits. It's not people living in town that are here talking, asking this and that about these. So I'm not quite sure where this information has come from about all these people that want all these trees. I don't see it. It's not present. I'm not against trees, but their trees are to be put in a certain place at a right time and with it. Otherwise, like I've said, and I know, they ruin sidewalks, they ruin streets, and they have problems, or you will have problems then with utilities underground.
Okay, we're not going to go there tonight, please. Any more comments on the proposed plan?
If we don't have adequate, sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
If we don't have adequate right away, how do we remediate that situation? And also, I don't think in this situation where it's an either or parking versus trees, I think it's both and. I don't think trees in any way impede parking on this street.
Okay. Where are you on this? As far as leaving the existing in or not? Is there a vote? Okay. I think we're done here. Move along.
Okay, so Mayor, just to clarify, it's a little bit hard for me to hear some of the discussion in the room, but it sounds like no resolution on this one. It sounds like the question at hand is making the landscape strips optional. Is that right? Or required versus optional?
Yeah, but I think our city attorney pointed out that 10-foot sidewalks are required in the commercial zone. So
Right.
there's not going to be right away to require it.
Right. And folks, just to be super clear, if I haven't been already, I'm not advocating one way or another on this issue. As somebody who you've hired to help you solve this, I'm here to just present information and let you all decide what's best for your community. But, again, I'll just kind of reiterate the comment that Michael previously made about what these cross sections are intended to do. The intent is not for these to put the city in a position where now you're hamstrung for funds or for requirements that you can't meet, right? I think the idea here is to provide some flexibility and idealized street cross sections that the city can aspire to over time as funding and opportunity align. So realistically, I think for most communities, or essentially for every community that I've ever worked with, as soon as you adopt a TSP, a huge portion of your street network is functionally substandard, right? And I think that's okay. So I think that, at least part of the apprehension in the room that I'm hearing might be minimized by just keeping that in mind, right? Like you're not committing to having to do this, even if it says required on the page. It's really just future insurance so that when the funding is there, when the opportunity is right, when the right developers in the room and everybody's on the same page, you have the ability to require that improvement. So just keep that in mind that these aren't going to become requirements overnight and put the city in a dicey situation.
Thank you.
All right. So folks, there's just one more of these to talk about. So this is the newest one that we've added based off of, again, your feedback. We heard about the need to develop a standard that addresses residential streets in areas of town that are maybe older or maybe just aren't in the right context to be developed to the full street standard. So recognizing again that Carlton is a growing community, there are swaths of the community that still feel relatively rural. So we wanted to come up with a low cost and implementable option that still gave us some benefits without introducing a whole bunch of concrete and complexity. So this is what we're calling a rural residential option. So this is a 5-foot at grade walking path. So essentially a striped shoulder. Unlike some of the other ones where I've been kind of wishy-washy about the painted buffer, I do think that here that they would need to be painted to create that delineation and distance from between pedestrians and drivers. I would also recommend that, if the city was to move forward with this kind of a design, that you use up at a minimum that full 1-foot buffer and shy for the same purposes. And here we essentially have, the minimum that we can provide while meeting those emergency access requirements. So 20 feet of unobstructed width, which results in 10-foot drive lanes in each direction. And then I've also kind of put in some flex space essentially. So in the illustration, it's 1 to 4 foot of shoulder. That could certainly be landscaping, depending on the context and the exact environment that we're talking about. But generally, we would assume that you would need some kind of, shoulder or additional right-of-way space to accommodate any unknowns in this kind of a design. A couple more things to mention before I turn it back over to you. So no curb and gutter. So this is a situation where, stormwater would be on the surface and would need to run off from the roadway crown. Next to a fire hydrant, you would need to increase the minimum pavement. So currently we're showing 30, but if you're next to a fire hydrant, you would need to increase that to at least 36 per fire standards. And like I mentioned before, I would recommend pretty strongly that, if this was adopted, that the buffer and shy was dictated to be, or not dictated, but required to be striped. So that's that. I'll turn it back over to you. And actually, before I do, we do have an additional illustration. I think we shared this last time. Here's an example of what these can look like. Again, we're not getting into the business of recommending materials and exact designs, but just to give you a flavor of what this might look like, this is taken from a pretty cool resource. If you're ever curious, it's called the Small Town and Rural Design Guide. It's basically an entire guidebook on how to design for smaller cities. And they have some cool ideas. So in this one, you can see something very similar to what we've laid out and a couple of illustrations that I've taken from throughout the state. So yeah, I'll kick it over to the council and commission for discussion on this one.
Comments?
Yeah, I guess I'm okay with leaving it as an option. I just, from that map that was provided, we don't have anything designated in this category, so it's hard for me to understand where exactly that would be. But again, back to your point, and the gentleman from ODOT's, like, I don't think it hurts to have it in there where situations allow it.
Thank you, Counselor. And I think there might be some opportunity to help with that, similar to the narrow street option where we have that footnote that has some kind of basic thresholds. Again, not to be overly prescriptive. So maybe what we can say is something along the lines of, per city discretion or something similar to that language that's already in there. Just again, to give you guys some flexibility and something in your back pocket.
Eddie, this is Scott again, if I can chime in. I'm kind of wondering where maybe it was from the last council discussion that there was this option. I just got to remind the council about clear and objective standards, the importance of that in review of residential developments. And I can foresee entertaining a question maybe early in the process with the developer asking, okay, what distinguishes exactly with the question that was asked by Councilor Skipper, where does this apply and where does it not apply? And so I think we would need to refine that footnote number 12 there, that seems to reference again a number of units as a threshold, but not much else. So an available right of way. Yeah. So that's the same thing there, is that we need qualifiers and to be clear on exactly when this would apply.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Scott.
Yes.
I agree. We need really clear standards for when this would apply, because I can imagine this would be a very inexpensive way for a developer to develop a street. And when you think about a subdivision of 19 houses, which is not unusual for what we've been getting, it would be really sad to see a whole subdivision made with this sort of infrastructure for a street. Thank you.
Are there any other comments? Yes, I can't see you. Go ahead.
This is Commissioner Madrid. I currently live on a street like this, and I'm just trying for a little levity late in the evening here, that I think it's kind of humorous that there would be striping for pedestrians, but not bicyclists. And I think any rural streets, and I'm saying outside of the TSP, currently, like I said, they have those crunchy edges to the pavement. And around here anyway, it's usually a deep ditch on either side. So maybe to avoid it being used in a subdivision, we could say rural. I mean, obviously there is that caveat, only used with permission of the city, but we could attach something defining rural, and then maybe if there's existing ditches or something like that. But I'm not comfortable leaving it open-ended for a developer within the city.
Yes.
From the sounds of it, I don't know. I guess I missed it when somebody proposed this or wanted to see it, but maybe it sounds like we just remove it as an option and push people towards the local narrow option if we feel more comfortable with that.
Mhm. Yeah, Councilor Skipper, that's kind of the vibe I'm getting as well, if I'm being honest. So we might have just missed the mark on this one. So maybe we can entertain that. I mean, would there be any heartache about removing this and consolidating our list of options a bit?
Eddie, can I speak for just a moment? Madam Mayor, may I be recognized?
Yes.
I think this one may be talked with staff a little bit more. I think this probably came out of a conversation with Gordon in some of our already developed areas of town. One I can think of right now is Park Street. And we had a house come in that was an infill, and it triggered the sidewalk and all of that. And when we spent quite a bit of time in the field trying to figure out what would make sense in that area, but also meet the code, but wouldn't require that if we continued, if future houses were then developed, we wouldn't be essentially putting sidewalk down the middle of the properties. And so I think this is one that probably staff can work on and provide some more guidance, because that is something that Gordon was concerned about, is as we do get these pockets or these lots of infill development on an already developed street or very developed area of town, how does staff then have a clear and objective standard in which to hold these?
Thank you, Shannon. And you're right. I think the idea was seeded by Gordon in those conversations, so I appreciate that.
Okay. Yes.
Eduardo, Commissioner Chavez, I would leave it because we could use it for like a country homes, they build houses, they have 1 acre and you have a country home in it. I mean, this will work. I mean, I don't see the need for sidewalks and everything else when you have large lots. So I will leave it as an option.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. And again, that just makes me think that, it could be viable in certain contexts. We just need to define what rural means, right? Like where is that context where it's appropriate?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks, folks. I know that was a lot to get through, but very important. And I think we got a lot of good feedback. And I feel like at least on 80% of it, we got clear direction. So I think we have plenty to work with. And again, you'll have an opportunity to review this in advance of the Planning Commission public hearing. And then you'll have another chance at the second public hearing and then any subsequent hearings that the city decides to have, if any. So anyway, thank you very much. I feel like we addressed a lot of this, but you know, please take a look at these discussion questions. And if you do have anything else to add or any additional thoughts, we would certainly appreciate it. But at the end of the day, you know, I think the take-home message here is that we're trying to thread the needle between a bunch of variables, right? Cost, right of way, community priorities, and what people actually need, and funding opportunities and implementation for the future. So it's a lot to think through, but I do appreciate the conversation. All right. Do folks? Well, Mayor, I guess I'll ask you directly. Do folks need a break, or should we keep going? What's the plan?
We've lost most of our planning commissioners and starting to lose our counselors. Our council rules do say we are to end at 9:30, with the exception of you can continue if you like. And I
Okay.
think we have a hand by our city attorney and our council president.
A hand to keep going or a hand to wrap it up?
Before we move on past the right of way and improvements, Eddie, could you just double check before you bring this back, the cul-de-sac numbers? I don't think the math works how it's laid out.
Yes, we'll do.
Okay, Counselor.
That's kind of what my point was, is, I understand it's late, but I mean, there's 40, 50 more pages that we haven't gotten to. And one of the biggest things was funding and funding implementations. I just didn't know if those are kind of open-ended topics, or, you know, because the next step here is for this to go to the planning commission for a public hearing.
Right.
So I guess I'm a little bit hesitant to hear what Eddie's feedback is on that, because I definitely had some concerns, as most of our citizens will, with SDCs, street funds, new utility rates. Like, is that, again, is that just an overarching ongoing discussion, or is that something that is going to need to be presented to the public?
And Counselor, just to clarify, that is a question for me directly?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, how can I put this? The projects that we've identified are the ones that we've prioritized through, you know, what we've heard from community members, from the PAC, et cetera. And the number that we're getting, like the total value of those potential improvements, are what they are. So that number will not change. I think the thing that's up for debate within the community is how big of a package do we want to take on as a community, right? So right now we've organized the projects into like near term, medium term, cost constrained, meaning there's some viable potential funding source versus aspirational. And I do think that there's probably going to be some lively discussion around, you know, why do we have, you know, 25 crossings that we're looking at? Can we just look at 3, you know? Again, this gets to kind of the challenges around communicating with the public around what a TSP is. I think those numbers can be really intimidating when you're looking at, you know, tens of millions of dollars over 20 years. It can sound like a lot, but again, the purpose of the plan is not to prescribe what the city needs to do and must do. It's to give you a clear blueprint for where to invest over the next 20 years and have something to point to when those funding opportunities arise. I promise I'm almost done. I think the other place where we would want some feedback, and this doesn't feel like this probably doesn't have to be a presentation, but it's just the funding forecast. So I've been working with Shannon and Amy on that. We've crunched the numbers a few different ways. It always surprises me how many different ways you can crunch a city budget, but you know, we want to make sure that we're getting the amount of potential revenue that the city will have over the next 20 years right. I think we're close based off of my conversations with Shannon, but I would really appreciate planning commission and city council feedback on that. And maybe those are the 2 biggest things that we want like direct feedback on. I think otherwise, like I said, the numbers are what they are. I mean, the cost estimates won't change much at this point in the process. You know, they're based on unit costs and industry best standards. So really the main thing that we can change is how big of a package we want to recommend in the final TSP.
Council commissioners, are you interested in me working with the consultant to see if there's room for either a special meeting or pushing the schedule back?
I just feel like that's like this discussion has been very fruitful and I appreciate it. But that's the biggest part of this.
Mhm.
And I feel like I'd hate to just be like, well, we'll just present it and like, you know, we've eaten this thing alive, but we haven't gotten down to the most important thing, which is funding and coming up with a plan that's going to be presented to the community that has our buy-in without really discussing it feels not great to me.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I agree with Kevin that this needs to be extended as another meeting to discuss the funding.
I'm seeing another nod. And that's not just from sleep, right?
But, you know, I'm agreeing with two of the city councilors here, and I think it's prudent to push back that timeline to have a fruitful discussion as to how we could potentially fund it.
Mhm.
If there are no other objections, I'll talk to Eddie and see what we can do within the parameters of the budget. And then we'll come up with some options, whether that's a special meeting or whether it's moving things down a month.
Mhm.
That work for you guys?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
In that
And,
case, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mayor. I was just going to say, and you know, I would also just encourage you all to please take a look at the memo if you haven't already. You know, I don't, again, I don't think the numbers will change much at this point, but it's very important that if we are going to make changes, people understand where the work is starting from, what the total package of potential improvements looks like, you know, what the potential funding strategies might be, so that if we do have a second session, you know, we're not starting from scratch. I think that would be really helpful. So I know that you've all probably shared information and feedback with Shannon and Amy offline, but I think that's a helpful step in the process is just getting as much feedback as we can in writing so that we can respond to it in the meetings in advance. So that's all, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay. Are we done? Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, Eddie.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Yeah, take care.